Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here in the Treehouse. Before we start our discussion of this month's entry into the Positive Masculinity playlist, I wanted to remind you to check out the show notes for the list of sources we use in this episode, as well as a list of content warnings. If you would like to connect with us or share ideas for future episodes, you can find us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook at A Safe Place for Boys, or email us at safeplaceforboys@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe out there and enjoy the show. I thought you were going to say Macho Man Randy Savage.
Macho Man Randy Savage.
I was like, is that his thing? He was a Shogun?
No.
That'd be a pretty good wrestling persona.
No, his thing was all about the cream.
Oh, God.
Of the crop.
Professional wrestling is insane.
And how he rises to the top. Because I'm the cream.
But is he a Jezebel?
Let me tell you, Mean Green Jean, I'm the cream. No, he's not.
We're off topic.
Only slightly.
Leave it in.
Welcome to A Safe Place for Boys, compassionate conversations about masculinity in media. I am Master Spencer, Dr. Bennington the Fourth. That's right. All of those things are true except for the number. And I am joined today by my lovable host. It's Kung Fu Kelcee Sykes.
I don't know Kung Fu. Unlike Keanu Reeves, I've never once woken up having downloaded all of Kung Fu into my head, much to my own shame and my family's shame and really my whole community's shame. I'm sorry I've let you all down.
You're really more well-versed in the Japanese martial arts, I would say. You're experienced with a bokken, which is a wooden sword, a practiced katana.
I am not.
As well as a variety of shuriken,
I also am not. I do
ninja
own a
stars.
shuriken, though.
You do. Don't go around advertising that. They're illegal in some states.
Oh, no.
Wink, wink. But who knows where we're recording this?
And also, it's made of foam.
Well, no, you have a real one, too. I made sure of that.
I was trying to give us plausible deniability. They're going to shut us down.
A real foam shuriken. I think actually shuriken is also a throwing sort of knife thing, but like there's a variety. Like there's the stars that I think of when I think of shuriken. There are kunai with chains, which are kinds of throwing knives that you can attach chains to. There are senbon, which are like throwing needles.
Yeah.
But I think like what we think of when we imagine a ninja star isn't a shuriken necessarily, but I can't remember.
What kind does Naruto use?
Well, so that's a trick question because factually, actually, most of the time he's throwing shuriken, I think they are like four-pointed, very small stars that he's using in the way that ninjas would have actually used them, which are like distraction techniques. You throw them like at people's eyes and stuff. They're not really meant to cause damage. They're just scary. You have sharp bits of metal flying at you.
And then while people are distracted, you can turn into a log.
Yes. Now see, because what you're referencing is the Demon Shadow Shuriken, which is a gigantic, this is a shuriken with 4 machete-sized blades that then somehow unfold to 8 machete-sized blades, that the shadow is also another shuriken that sometimes can turn into Naruto, that turns into a log, that turns into a shuriken, and then he throws a kunai, and that gets Kakashi out of the water prison.
Yeah, and sometimes he turns himself into a naked woman.
Yep.
And that's part of it, too. That's what it means to do martial arts. I'm pretty sure. After all of the conversations we've had about this topic, I feel pretty confident that throwing knives and turning into a naked woman is what martial arts are all about.
I would think that the film we're about to discuss today also reinforces that belief. There is a number of thrown projectiles, deflected projectiles, and attractive people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today,
And almost
Kelcee?
none of them are children in disguise. We are talking about We're talking about The Last Dragon.
We're talking about Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon.
Berry Gordy's The Last Dragon. Yes, I'm so sorry for not giving Berry Gordy the credit that he undoubtedly and exclusively deserves.
Yes, of course. His name's in the title. I'm sorry. We were doing a little refresher because peek behind the podcast. We watched this one a bit ago, and then holiday seasons happened, and we recorded a different one. And due to the production schedule, maybe it's not the freshest in our minds right now.
Maybe we watched it in November and it's now February. Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that for sure, is that just could have, that's a possibility.
Well, what's exciting though is we don't necessarily have to be the freshest of the Fresh Princes for this particular topic, because lucky us, we have a guest on the show today.
We sure do.
A guest expert.
And by today, we mean 2 months ago.
It was, you're going to hear it today.
Yeah.
It's today to you.
Yeah, but we do have an expert.
We do.
Last Dragon expert.
I'm excited that when we analyze The Last Dragon, I will be interviewing Ed McClain, great friend of mine, father of 1 million children. Not really, just 8, but that's basically 1 million.
That's plenty.
And and given the movie's themes and the fact that this was a film that was important to him in more of his, childhood and adolescence, I thought that it would be important to have that perspective. And when you know it, he's also a music producer and has some things to say about the villainy of music production as portrayed in this film. But we'll get there. But I will just go ahead and say, if you want to check out more of Ed McClain's work, you can find his music on SoundCloud and Bandcamp, and there will be links to that in the show description. Anywho, shall we dive right in?
Let's dive right in.
Cool. So, Last Dragon, a Motown Productions film from 1985, stars Timok as the often laughable but always lovable Bruce Leroy. And let's just pause right there. That's
that isn't even his name,
yeah.
To be clear. That's not the character's name.
No.
His name is Leroy Green?
Leroy Green, yeah. But anyone who's talking about this movie these days, if you mention the character, you don't say, oh, that show, that movie with Leroy Green. No, it's Bruce Leroy.
Yeah.
And that instantly summons some of the more iconic scenes from this film.
There must be other historical figures like this who have this sort of reverberating legacy, but I feel like Bruce Lee, people who make movies in the tradition of Bruce Lee really want you to know they're doing that.
Yeah.
How do you feel about, you're a Bruce Lee fan. Do you feel like this is like doing a service to his legacy? Because some of them definitely do a disservice.
Well, that's a great question, Kelcee, because, and I hadn't planned on getting into this, so you're going to get the sort of rough download, but Bruce Lee was a sort of culture-shifting, icon, right? And by the time he achieved fame in the United States in 1973 with the release of Enter the Dragon, a Warner Bros. Flick, he was dead. He was alive, I believe, for the debut of the film in Hong Kong and sort of got a taste of just how much of an international superstar he was going to be. He was already a Chinese action film star because of the previous films that were released as Golden Harvest productions, and had done bigger box office numbers in Hong Kong and in China than any of the previous stars had. So he'd already achieved a level of fame, but it wouldn't be until Enter the Dragon and then sort of Western audiences just clamored for more of this cat screeching, muscle striation sort of just amazing athlete who was doing things in terms of fight choreography and film production that just hadn't been seen before. And there's a whole host of reasons why that is, and maybe we'll link some interesting martial arts studies articles and work from my good friend Paul Bowman in the show notes, because he's really the Bruce Lee guy. But I say all that because it left a weird void in the American consciousness, particularly, where it's like they had just given celebrity status to this person, and then as soon as they did, they realized, oops, he's already dead. And that just did a weird thing where there were suddenly these millions of fans overnight who just could not wait for the next Bruce Lee movie. Mm-hmm. But there wasn't going to be another Bruce Lee movie. And so what that did was open the door for a number of other talented, actors and martial artists to try and fill that void. Some did so by, forging their own path and just like making their own movies. But some, and like, directors and producers and various companies are at fault here too. But some like out and out tried to fool the general public by adopting names like Bruce Lay and Bruce Lie and like I'm not even kidding. Yeah, like immediately after Bruce Lee's death, we call this the Bruceploitation era. It was an error. Yeah. In my opinion. But like we even see this with Bruce Lee's unfinished movie that also featured Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, The Game of Death. That's the movie where he gave us the iconic yellow jumpsuit with the black pinstripe that Uma Thurman then popularized again in Kill Bill. That movie was so egregious because at the time of Bruce Lee's death, we had maybe like 18 minutes of finished footage that was like some really cool choreography of him doing fight scenes with people. And then some company decided to go ahead and make a movie around that where they had a Bruce Lee lookalike playing Bruce Lee in a movie where then he faked his own death, and then in the scenes where the Bruce Lee actor in the movie was dead, they used real footage from the real Bruce Lee's funeral and body in the movie. Like, just when I say Bruceploitation, I literally mean people were making millions off of a dead guy. Yeah. And quite intentionally, not just like they were inspired to make martial arts movies as well. No, they were making money because people didn't quite understand that Bruce Lee was dead. Or if they did, they were like, this is the next best thing. And so like there was basically a decade of that, like quite intentional exploitation. So by the time we get to 1985 and we get this movie Last Dragon with a character, Leroy Green, who is a black kid in Harlem who has grown up going to the Grindhouse Theater, seeing all of the different martial arts movies and idolizing Bruce Lee like so many did. It's a bit different because I'll admit, like when I first watched this, I fully expected this to be a blaxploitation film where the joke was, hey, wouldn't it be funny if a black kid pretended he was Bruce Lee and we called him Bruce Leroy and got to laugh at how dissimilar Black and Chinese culture are. And certainly there's like some of that in this movie. There are undertones of that like racialized humor, but I think it's doing a lot more to like poke fun at that issue instead of just sort of like making a minstrel show out of it.
It feels more like, at least to me, functional satire than it does like we're trying to get one over on the audience or trick the audience in some way. Like it feels more like, this is an homage based on, 10 years of cultural development around these movies. I don't know. It didn't strike me as like a gross attempt to cash in on a craze so much as it was like, we've had this sort of cultural legacy of this person who was gone for 10 years and this is sort of the outcome of it. And we're going to make a movie about the outcome of it, which is here is a totally different type of person who is now grown up with this cultural legacy of Bruce Lee, and this is what the outcome of that is. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah. I mean, this movie is definitely much more a commentary on what is it like to grow up in the generation immediately after the Kung Fu craze. Like, what is it like to be the impressionable youth who cut their teeth on the original, low budget, just grindhouse, overdubbed, sometimes silly, but often epic martial arts movies that were just flooding New York after 1973. And like similarly, one of my favorite groups of all time, Wu-Tang Clan, is another one of these stories of like kids that grew up in Staten Island just immersed in this kind of stuff. And like they took it and ran with it and became one of the most iconic hip hop groups of all time because like this was just such a sort of, I don't know, different influence than we were seeing from anyone else, you know, but I digress. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad we got all that out of the way. We can just cut it now, I get. No.
So we've gotten one character's name so far.
Well, but like, it's important because as soon as I heard that name, Bruce Leroy, I'm like, okay, I get the bit. Do I even really want to watch this? And it took me a long time to see this movie. I didn't see it for the first time until last year.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd never seen it before. I just like heard tale of it. I knew that it was sort of a joke, but then actually I watched this movie and I was like, oh my God, this isn't just like a pulpy way to spend a rainy day, like, I need to share this with Kelcee. You came home and I was like, I think you might actually, call me crazy. You might like this movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this movie does a lot of things that are surprising. If you were just to like read this quick synopsis of this, you'd be like, oh, it's one of those. No, they're really doing some things in this movie.
They really
are. Interesting.
They really are. So the film opens with an epic montage of Leroy shadowboxing, fighting training dummies with fantastical maneuvers, practicing chopsticks, and deflecting arrows fired at him by his instructor.
And he is so shirtless.
Shirtless.
So oily.
Glistening.
And you like don't even see his face for the first minute of this montage. It's just like chest and arms. And I was like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Cool. Who's the audience for this movie? So far, it is me.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about who else this movie's for.
Me too. Well, we talked about this in the like when we were chatting about Rocky 3, right? Like those close-ups on the slow-mo, like Carl Weathers and Sly Stallone running on the beach, and you just zoom into their thighs.
Yeah, they're very oily thigh muscles. Like, okay, it was the 80s, I guess.
Well, the truth is, like, in terms of masculinity studies, yeah, female gaze, sure, from like a heteronormative perspective, but also that is the male gaze, as we've discussed. Like, so many men aspire to shape their bodies in that way that it's motivational for a reason, and it's like inspiring for a reason, and it's gratifying to see that because it's like, oh, that could me running on the beach with Rocky music behind me.
Yeah, it's kind of objectification for bodybuilders a little bit, where instead of being like, look at all the parts of the body that make this person sexual, it's like, look at all of the parts of the body that like you might want to exercise.
Yeah.
And pinpoint when you go to the gym. You can take a picture of this man and be like, I want my chest to look like this one, please. Thank you.
So after we spend a solid 5 minutes celebrating the glistening body of Bruce Leroy, and then maybe you see his face once, we are introduced to a second character, a stereotypical kimono-wearing Miyagi-type orientalized master. We're 6 minutes in, and I'm like, oh no. But this opening sequence sees Leroy achieving what the master calls, quote, the final level, and his teacher explains that he is no longer his master. Unfortunately, though, Leroy is upset because he hasn't achieved the sublime glow that his teacher always said he would obtain at this stage. In response, the teacher explains that Kung Fu is not always like it is depicted in the movies, and that perhaps his student watches too much TV. And that's where I'm like, oh, you're not just a stereotype, you're self-aware. This is
That's
good.
Great. I also think it's funny that a character that we have not yet met, but who makes their money in video games, which in the 80s means like the cabinets, the arcade cabinets, but all this language of leveling up and like, well, if I press in the right buttons, then I'll get this thing, and that will mean that I am the champion. And this master would also be like, no, that's not how like real life works.
Yeah.
So we're already anti-video game ideology.
Yeah, I realize now that I had a question here for you, but you've already anticipated it. I was just saying that, so in the first 5 minutes, we have the male gaze, Motown, and some parody of classic martial arts movie tropes. What did you think about the way this film chooses to present itself in the opening credits? And I think we've definitively covered that.
Yeah, I mean, this, again, like, everything about this, the tone of this movie screams satire to me. And I think in order to do satire, we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about South Park, but you kind of have to, like, do the thing in order to satirize the thing. And this movie is already starting out with, isn't it kind of strange that all of these movies are like weirdly oily and sexual, and like the sort of grindhouse era being like, what did you go to watch in these theaters? Well, martial arts movies and porn. So those two types of genres were closely situated next to each other, particularly in places like New York. So I think this movie is starting right out the bat being like, we know what you came here to see. Here it is. Oh, and now you want this guy to come and say some like fortune cookie shit. he's not gonna.
Mm-hmm.
You think he's gonna, he's not. And you think that, like, oh, you're gonna go on the hero's journey and you're going to acquire some, like, mystical, orientalized idea and, oh, that's what it will mean to be. No.
Yeah.
No. Just it's breaking expectations right away while also kind of being like, look at this guy, though.
Yeah.
He's in pretty good shape.
Well, it's funny because in two ways there. So I was just going to mention that, like, one of the ways this movie does good satire is it doesn't just pay lip service to martial arts tropes.
Mm-hmm.
It has excellent martial arts in it,
Mm-hmm.
courtesy of Black martial arts icon Ron Van Cleef, as well as Ernie Reyes Sr., who I believe were the fight choreographers. And for martial arts fans out there, those names will mean something to you, especially Ron Van Cleef, aka the Black Dragon. And then on the other hand, what you mentioned about the, like, presumably orientalized master, we do really just expect him to, like, have what you called fortune cookie wisdom. And we're not the only ones, because he recognizes his student Leroy is caught up in what he says is too much TV or spends too much time watching movies. And so Leroy, as a student on the cusp of being a master and reaching that final stage, still has some misconceptions about what reaching the pinnacle of martial arts really means. And he's expecting that. He's expecting that fortune cookie wisdom. And so, in a way, the master absolutely gives it to him. Leroy is distraught, feeling lost at being without a teacher in this final stage of his journey. In an effort to help Leroy better understand his quest, the teacher tasks him with finding some dumb goy, an ascended master who happens to live in nearby Chinatown. Wow, that's so lucky.
That's so convenient.
So
He's
lucky.
been here the whole time.
There's an ascended master just right around the corner, just a few blocks that way in Chinatown.
Let's go find him.
In addition, the instructor also gives Leroy a golden medallion that supposedly belonged to Bruce Lee himself to use as proof that he is worthy to train with the wisest man in the universe. Wow.
I believe all of it.
Yeah.
This guy just has some Bruce Lee stuff.
Yeah.
Like, just has it.
It's
Where'd
funny.
you get it?
It's funny because, like, even in this initial scene, I don't think we as the audience are supposed to buy any of that.
No.
But Leroy absolutely does.
Yeah.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Well, that's kind of his character.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It's incredibly, like, gullible to a fault. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Just, like, adorably impressionable. So here, now that Leroy has his quest, right, what he was looking for.
He's off on his hero's journey.
Yeah. The movie cuts to spliced footage from the actual 1973 Bruce Lee classic, Enter the Dragon, that I mentioned earlier. And we enter a grindhouse theater filled with the raucous and diverse crowds of Harlemites, all heckling the screen or cheering along with the action. Despite the boisterousness and grimy atmosphere, everyone seems to be having a good time watching the movie.
Love to see it.
Yeah, we do love to see it. Everyone's just getting along. It's nice. It's nice in New York, 1985.
Oh, yeah. There were no problems
Famously.
in New York in 1985.
That is, until the obnoxious Show Nuff and his gang waltz in.
I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed.
I'm extremely curious to hear your take on the villain of this movie and his entourage of hockey pad wearing lackeys.
Yeah, or like football pads. They're just wearing like the craziest combination of clothes, but like full 80s glam.
Yeah.
He's got, as all 80s villains had to, just like 12 women. Ladies, what? You just got nothing but time, first of all, to follow this man around Harlem, just wandering into movie theaters, finding people for him to be mad at arbitrarily. And also, they all just kind of like say his name a lot. Like, that's kind of what they do, is they just walk in the room and they're like, show enough. And that's all they say. They're like Pokemon, but for him. And it's fantastic. Is he paying them? How can they all afford to just follow this man around all day?
I don't know, because, like, he doesn't seem to have a job either. He's not out there, like, teaching karate.
No, he's just like, walking around in his cut-off shirt.
Yeah.
Threatening people,
like,
for no discernible reason whatsoever.
We don't even see him do criminal activity until the end, and then he refuses money for it. Like,
incredible.
Have no idea.
Where are you getting your money, Shonuff? Those women are so beautiful. Why are they here? And there are also, like, 2 dudes. There's, like, 12 women and just kind of 2 dudes.
Yeah.
Who are also like, I'm also here.
Yeah. So Shonuff definitely pulls from the tradition of what we would expect to find in a Bruce Lee movie, as well as many other kung fu flicks of the era. So once again, pulling directly from Bruce Lee movies like Fists of Fury and various other Shaw Brother films depicting anti-Japanese sentiment through the lens of a pro-China hero, Shonuff calls himself, quote, the Shogun of Harlem. Yeah.
I will just say, I don't think he has, like, a ton of competition for that title. I don't think a lot of other people, even people who are very good at martial arts, really want to be the Shogun of Harlem, it doesn't seem like. It kind of seems like it's just him and his gang of beautiful women.
Yeah.
And they're the only ones who seem to care about this at all.
Yeah. And in case you're curious, dear listener, a shogun, just in case you didn't get wrapped up in the 2024 Hulu drama, is a military leader of samurai, the legendary swordsmen of feudal Japan. Therefore, Shonuff represents the tough, militarized, and in some ways later Americanized versions of macho man karate that became increasingly popular in the post-Korean War era United States. Despite his raucous entrance and challenge to anyone in the theater to prove that he's not the baddest man in town, young Richie Green, Leroy's little brother, remarks that Shonuff ain't so tough, and that Leroy could mop the floor with him. At this point, even though Leroy is in the theater, he seems much more content keeping his mouth shut, except when he opens it to eat some popcorn with chopsticks.
With chopsticks, yes.
I mean, I was going to specifically ask you about this topic here, because this movie keeps on giving us these visual jokes, particularly, and I'm just curious if any of these moments of humor that relied on these kinds of cultural stereotypes were too outrageous or over the top. So, like, in this scene, Leroy is wearing what looks like silken kung fu training robes, and he's wearing the sort of wide-brimmed, like, rice patty hat a la Raiden from Mortal Kombat. Like, and to his credit, he does have it sort of, like, tipped back, and it's, like, around his neck. He's not wearing it on top of his head, because that'd be extremely rude to wear in a theater.
Yeah, he is in the front row of the theater. That would be pretty rude.
And he's, of course, eating the popcorn with chopsticks. And I'm just curious if you took this as like a joke against Asian or Black communities, or do you think the movie is like doing a self-aware satire thing and it's more of just a joke about Leroy himself and like people like Leroy?
Well, I mean, obviously I don't have the authority to say if it is a joke against any particular ethnic group, but I also think it's kind of going along with what, you know, his teacher says in that first scene, which is like, you watch too many movies. Here's what I'll say. It reminds me a little bit of like when I was in high school, there was like, and I, to be clear, almost exclusively went to high school with white people, but like the Japanese club, they would have all of their anime shirts and they would be wearing their like kitsune headband with the little ears and they would have the tail and they would be like, this is who I am, mom. Like just people who get very into the aesthetics of another culture and like maybe they're being respectful about it, maybe they're not, but it seems like this is the behavior of someone who has like watched a lot of movies and is like, well, these are the outfits they wear in the movies and they eat with chopsticks, so I'm gonna eat with chopsticks. And I feel like that is one of the things that we see recurring with Leroy is people sort of rolling their eyes when it also comes up sort of in the way that he speaks too, and it becomes clear that like part of this is it's just more comfortable for him to move through the world this way than it is, you know, we see him not opposed, but like contrasted to his little brother in this scene who, you know, speaks very differently than Leroy does.
Richie is Superfly.
Yeah. Yeah, there is a sort of a culture among the other Black characters in Harlem that he is not embodying.
Yeah.
And we kind of get the sense later in the movie that he doesn't feel comfortable embodying a lot of those behaviors. And so my reading, having watched the full movie, is he is sort of taking on these aesthetics of the sort of Asian stereotypes as a way to like make himself feel more comfortable as a person who like doesn't, for whatever reason, want to or feel comfortable moving through the world the way that his brother does, for example, or the way that Shonuff does, or his parents do, or anything like that. But in this first scene, it's like, oh, you're in the Japanese club in high school, and you're, you know, we're all eating our lunch with chopsticks because that's what they do in Japan. Kind of like, that's the stereotype that struck me, but that's also based on my experience seeing white people watch anime and be like, I actually am Sailor Moon if you think about it.
No, I mean, I think you're onto it though, and like we'll see this later because we see different versions of this same joke, not all just pointed at Leroy throughout the film. And so I do think this movie is really kind of making you think about, hey, racism doesn't just mean like saying slurs and like being nasty to people that are different from you. Sometimes it comes in the form of like this like highly intense infatuation, but only with surface level stereotypical knowledge. And so ultimately you're just recreating not the culture so much as like weird facsimiles of what has been fed to you by people probably not from that culture. Like, you know?
And that it's like he is getting his information about those cultures largely through the media that he is watching. And so it is inherently sanitized and repackaged, and it's limited by the nature of the medium that he's receiving the information through. So by definition, he can't have a super authentic expression of any particular Asian culture because his source of information is, for the most part, movies, which we already know he's obsessed with because we learned that in the first scene.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I really actually appreciate that Miyagi ripoff character because at every point he not only reminds Leroy like, oh, you watch TV too much, but there's a point later in the movie where it's a throwaway joke of Leroy being like, Master, where are you traveling? Back to the old country? And he goes, no, I'm going to visit my mom in Florida. Or something like.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like, sweet.
Yeah.
So like in a way, just sort of reminding us of, this person's culture is New York, not necessarily like what you might think of based on his skin color or whatever. Like, you know. So, but anyway, it's going to be a question that just like keeps coming up throughout this film because it's certainly a big theme here. But anyway, back to the theater. This scene ends up being pretty wild. Shonuff challenges Leroy and ends up starting an all-out brawl. But Leroy slips away amidst the chaos and exits without fighting. Meanwhile, all of the wonderfully queer audience members and like the Rainbow Coalition are just going at it, you know? They're just beating the hell out of each other.
It's so funny to me because just imagine that you're a person in this theater. You're like, I'm going out to the theater. We're going to watch some cheesy movies, have a good time. And like the movie gets stopped halfway through because some guy, just a dude, walks in with his posse who are all dressed in sort of semi-matching outfits. And they're like, I'm the toughest man in town. And
no. He's like, who's the toughest man in town?
Can you imagine, though, if you were at a movie theater and a man just came in and was like, fight me? You'd be like, no.
Yeah.
Who are you? No.
I mean, I wish that happened. As soon as you start that hypothetical and you're like, a man comes into the movie theater and immediately I'm just like, with a gun.
Well, yeah.
And
in
then,
the real world.
And it's horrible.
But in a world where, like, fun things happen instead of relentlessly terrible things. Even that, if a guy just walked in and was like, I need to establish that I'm the strongest man here. How is the reaction not just, sorry, what?
Yeah.
Sir, are you okay?
Yeah.
Is everything okay at home, Shonuff? Why are you doing... Why does this matter so much to you?
The absolute...
These are strangers, buddy. They don't care about you.
Oh, but they do. The immediate buy-in to his ridiculousness of just people rushing the stage and trying to fight him and getting their shit kicked in is hilarious. Now, granted, I do think he messes up the screen and so they can't watch the movie anymore.
Yeah.
So I'd be pretty pissed about that.
Well, and also the first person to stand up to him is like an 8-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just like immediately deflating, even if the premise is maybe somebody in this room would try to fight him. Just the first person being like, nah, dude.
Yeah.
No, I'm a child and I can tell this is embarrassing for you. And then the reaction in real life would just be like, yeah, bud, are you okay? Do you want to sit down? We can get you some water. What's going on here, man?
You're right to point out that this is a silly scene. So let's cut away to a very serious scene, because at this point we navigate to some sort of Dr. Evil style lair revealed to be the mobster hangout of Eddie Arcadian and his bodyguard, a disgraced title fighter known only as Rock.
Not Not to be confused with The Rock.
No.
Just Rock.
Rock. Not to be confused with Rocky, which of course is the joke. Not to be confused with Rocco, who is just a rock.
Rocco's not alive.
He is not alive.
We at the Safe Place for Boys believe Rocco is not alive.
That is our official
not
position.
Get to have the last oatmeal cookie.
This rock, however, we see feeding a mysterious sea monster shark mutant they keep in a tank.
Don't even talk to me about the mutant in the tank.
Will it come back? Is
No.
this Chekhov's mutant shark?
No, it's not. And it's the most disappointing thing to me about this movie. I wanted to see somebody get eaten by a shark, and I didn't get it.
Yeah, it's the old bait and switch.
Yep. How dare you?
I do think the water imagery is important, though. We'll talk about that later, because the tank does come back. We don't see the creature. We just see the water bubble when, like, Rock feeds it, and Eddie's all pissed off. He's like, I thought I told you to get rid of that thing. But, like,
yeah, it's like Rock's pet, too. It's not even, like, part of the lair. It's just like, oh, my friend didn't have room in his apartment for this tank, so he's keeping it in my office.
But we are for sure supposed to think that at some point James Bond is going to be dropped into that pool.
Oh, I was like, a woman will be dangled over it.
Yeah.
And Eddie Arcadian will absolutely die in this tank. And I mean,
spoiler
good on
alert.
this movie for, turning my expectations on their head. But I was like, oh, I kind of wanted to see somebody get eaten by the big monster.
I guess I did too, but to the credit of the movie, I think this was their way of saying, this is in fact a satire. We are making fun of this like low-hanging fruit. Like you see this thing and it doesn't take a film scholar to imagine, oh, I bet that's going to come up later. Yeah. And it's like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, this is no actual Bond villain here. This guy, again, he makes arcade cabinets.
Yeah.
That's how this man made his money.
And they're not alone. Eddie, Rock, and they are also accompanied by a character who I thought was going to absolutely annoy the piss out of me the first time I watched this. The presumably ditzy Angie, one of Eddie's would-be starlets watching music videos. Oh, Angie.
Oh, Angie. I love Angie.
Yeah.
Angie is my hero,
and
I love her. And I don't know that she got a lot more work in the 80s, but I hope she did.
Yeah. One of the few actual quotes that I looked up is hers because it's one of the best in the movie, and we'll get there.
Yeah.
But to give us a glimpse of the music video culture that Angie is so obsessed with, the film uses snippets of DeBarge's Rhythm of the Night to cut away to the other main female lead.
Also fantastic.
The
Great
music.
Women in this movie.
Oh yeah. Well, that's...
These women.
But that's immediately, after I watched this the first time, I was like, I think Kelcee might actually like these women.
These women.
And of course, the second female lead I'm referring to is Laura Charles, host of a dance club style music video show called Seventh Heaven.
And I love Laura Charles. There are many things about her that I love. Her ability to lip sync effectively is not one of them.
To give you an idea of what this like show is, because we just don't really have these anymore.
Soul Train.
Yeah, well, that's
basically.
That's what I wrote. I was like, imagine Soul Train meets TRL.
Yeah,
and then
it's sort of an updated Soul Train. Yeah,
realized that I'm a very old man by
God, the kids don't know about TRL, do they?
No.
Do the kids know about Carson Daly?
Not a chance.
Oh, God.
Anyway, the connection between Angie and Laura becomes quickly evident as the VJ is pressured by a PA named JJ, played by a young William H. Macy, to play a video as a special request from Eddie Arcadian. No one refuses Eddie Arcadian, you see.
Except for everyone in this movie repeatedly.
Except for everyone, especially Laura Charles. And yeah, you're right. She does not decide to air some stupid song about finding dirty magazines under your bed, but mostly because it's from an unknown artist and like it didn't go through the process, and she's the VJ. She gets to choose. Like that's her job.
It's her show.
So anyway, Laura declines, sticking to her integrity as a host, a musical connoisseur, and someone who believes in a less tyrannical approach to getting airtime. Of course, this is a move that enrages Arcadian when he finds out. And wouldn't you know it, this one decision sets the whole plot in motion. After her show, Laura enters a limo only to realize that her regular driver isn't behind the wheel. Before she can be fully abducted, however, Bruce Leroy steps in to save her from Arcadian's subpar goons. Of course, given how out of touch with pop culture he is, Leroy has no clue about Laura's celebrity status. He just sees a person in need.
We should maybe give a little bit of context about this show and like how it fits in. So basically, like, it's one of those shows where they just invite people in to come and dance on the dance floor that is being filmed. And so it's filming like in his neighborhood. So it's not just that like he doesn't know about celebrity culture. Like, he doesn't know that an extremely famous show is being filmed a block away from his apartment.
Yeah. Yeah, so you're right that the proximity is important. This studio must be within walking distance of where Leroy lives. We know that because his little brother, Richie, is frequently in attendance in the studio. Not sure how he's always getting in there, but he loves to dance.
Oh, he knows where the back door is.
He knows where the back door is. Yeah, it's this kind of show with this live dancing teen audience. And of course, the video that Eddie Arkadian wants to get on the air is none other than one that he helped produce, starring Angie.
Yeah. She's a kind of Cyndi Lauper if Cyndi Lauper sang songs that were just abject nonsense.
Yeah.
Truly unhinged lyrics.
Right. So anyway, given that Laura declined, goons tried to take her away, presumably just to have a nice chat, probably.
Oh,
with
they
Eddie.
seem really nice.
But Leroy's not having any of that, and he saves the day, but then just sort of hails a cab for Laura, and as soon as she's safe, he disappears without accepting thanks. Unfortunately, in his haste, he accidentally drops the golden medallion once belonging to Bruce Lee.
Oh, no, you gotta keep your hands on that. That's worth a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a priceless artifact. But luckily, Laura discovers this priceless artifact and hangs on to it, hoping to one day return it to her goofy hero. But as you can imagine, Eddie Arkadian is not exactly pleased when his goons relate how they failed because they were jumped by, quote, like 20 to 30 giant black guys, boss. Oh, God. Don't you love a machismo over-exaggeration?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they did get their asses kicked. That much is true. Determined to get what he wants and to make a star out of Angie, Eddie asks Rock to go get the girl. Again, this man is staging multiple kidnapping attempts to ultimately harass and intimidate a popular television personality to feature his girlfriend's crummy demo tape on air. Absolutely bonkers. Like, the premise of this movie is ridiculous.
Yeah, and it really is just kind of his plan, too.
Yeah.
No one else on planet Earth cares about this plan at all, up to and including Angie.
Yeah. So I just wanted to pause here and ask you, like, what do you make of Eddie Arkadian as a villain? Particularly given that this movie was produced by Motown and he is this kind of caricature of a music producer. And to make this a little bit more interesting, how would you characterize him compared to the other villain we've met so far, Sho'nuff? How do they stack up against each other?
I mean, it's sort of like two halves of the sort of toxic masculinity sphere, right? Like, Sho'nuff is all just like ego.
Mm-hmm.
It is just sort of aimless, pointless. I want to fight people and I want people to bow down to me in this sort of ultimately meaningless, all for show, sort of physical based intimidation. Whereas Eddie Arkadian is the capitalism arm of patriarchy, where it's just like, he's already got money. He's already clearly a powerful person. He just is like, I have this commodity in the form of a girlfriend, and I think I could make money off of her.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be told no because I'm a rich man, and certain types of people think that what it means to be a rich and powerful man is that, like, no one should ever tell you no. And if they do, you are then justified in bringing the full force of your wealth and power down on them for things that ultimately also don't matter at all. He already has money. This is not like a starving artist who's like, I really love this woman. I think she's really talented. We don't have a lot of resources, but we're trying to make it in this really difficult environment. It's not that kind of story. He's just sort of like, I have a doll that's on my couch sometimes. I could dress her up and film her. And I should make a lot of money on that.
Right.
Because that's what you do with, like, the stuff that you have, is you make money with it.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's ultimately, in a grand scheme, much more frightening than Sho'nuff is.
Sure. I mean, Sho'nuff is the starving artist. He's out there just trying to hone his craft and just prove that he's the best around.
He's got all these beautiful women he's got to keep in hockey pads. So, you know, he is hustling. But you can deflate a guy like that much easier by, again, just being like, hey, man, we all, like, respect you. You don't have to do this. Like, you have friends, clearly. You want to just sit down with these beautiful women and, like, have a conversation. You can probably have a nice time. He is a person that you could help, ultimately, I think. Whereas Eddie Arkadian, it's just sort of, no, you're just, like, evil. In the context of this movie, this evil is sort of diluted and extremely stupid. Mm-hmm. So he's a funny character.
Sure.
But the real life version of that is the real life record producers who are like, I'm going to take an underage girl and put her in a terrible outfit and make a bunch of money out of her and then dump her into a ditch at some point when she's 20 and therefore too old or whatever. Like,
and I'll just keep finding more, which is alluded to later in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, he's not. And I hate that we keep saying girlfriend. I'd like to make it clear that it's like, I don't think that's true.
She uses the language of we are in a relationship. He uses the language of you are a thing that I have.
Yeah.
So I think like what has been sold to her is we're in a relationship and I'm going to make you a star, baby, and I really love you and care about you. The audiences see through that immediately, though.
Speaking of cartoonish villains, from here, we cut away to Leroy teaching Kung Fu in the classic yellow and black Game of Death outfit, one popularized by Uma Thurman in Kill Bill and comedian Phil Wang on Taskmaster. This scene's great because it's where we first meet Johnny, a young Asian American slacker student of Leroy's who explains that he never really needs to fight anymore. All he's got to do is scare people with some intense cat screams and quick movements, and they know he's not one to mess with. I love it. We've talked about the changing stereotypes of Asian male bodies on this show before, but truly the kung fu craze ushered in by Bruce Lee's superstardom really did have this empowering effect on many Asian American men, even if the karate killer was just another stereotype replacing the former view of Chinese as sick men of Asia or Hollywood's effeminate oafs. I feel like on this show before I've mentioned Breakfast at Tiffany's being the sort of defining caricature of what Asian men who, again, we're talking about Mickey Rooney in yellowface and like strap-on buck teeth. We went from that point in Hollywood of most of the time, if there needed to be an Asian character, it was played by a white guy, and we didn't have Asian male leads. My point is, this Johnny character is silly, but represents an important turning point in history where, because of Bruce Lee, and then, other actors, your Jackie Chans, your Jet Lis of the world, suddenly, in America at least, the dominant Asian stereotype was, oh, I bet you know martial arts. You could probably kick my ass.
Yeah. I mean, there are always downsides to those things, too.
I'm not saying it's good.
Yeah. The joke in this movie is that, like, this particular guy has found a way to use that stereotype to his benefit so that he doesn't have to train very hard at real martial arts. He could just be like, well, I'm an Asian guy, so I probably know him. Yeah. Don't mess with me.
Yeah. Look at me.
Yeah, I can make the loud noise.
But it's just, I think this movie is really doing its due diligence in terms of like making fun of things, but also kind of highlighting like, oh, but aren't you silly? Aren't you silly for thinking this, audience member? Like,
yeah, if you have racist beliefs about people, they can also find ways to use those against you. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't know, maybe question your assumptions.
Yeah. Well, suddenly as we are, really contemplating all of these great questions of bias and bigotry, in the middle of class, Shonuff and his gang crash the school and challenge Leroy to a fight again. Leroy is too calm and collected to be goaded, and once again shows that he is not motivated by saving face or maintaining pride. However, after Johnny foolishly picks a fight with the brutal Shonuff and risks getting seriously hurt, Leroy endures the ultimate embarrassment by kneeling down and kissing the converse of the so-called master before taking a kick to the head in a defenseless position. This is where we need the soundboard to go, boo! Boo! Richie serves as the mouthpiece here and throughout the movie as he continually asks, why didn't you stand up for yourself? Why didn't you fight back for us? At this point in the film, even Leroy's students can't fully support his extreme pacifism, and Richie lets it be known just how embarrassed he is by the actions of his older brother. What do you think about this bit where, like, you know, he has to kiss the Converse and, like, he won't fight back? He just sort of, like, allows himself to be embarrassed and sort of gives in to Shonuff instead of standing up to this guy who, for all we know this point in the movie, Leroy could go toe-to-toe with.
Well, I think this is sort of like a martial arts trope thing of, like, you have this great power. When do you use it? And when is it not appropriate? When is it okay to fight? And when should you not fight, right? We talked about that in The Karate Kid too. Like, well, and this is something you talk about with your students. Like, you can hurt people. Should you? If so, when? That is a decision you have to make when you learn these types of things. So he's doing that thing where he's like, I've got a bunch of kids in here. Yeah. I'm not going to teach them that, like, just because some guy who has decided that this is the most important thing in the world to him, I now have to buy into his fantasy that physical prowess is a thing that matters. I don't want that to be what I teach my students in this moment. And I also, like, do I want to do the Letterkenny thing where I have to get into a fist fight with every guy who comes to town because that's a thing that we've collectively decided is important? Not only, like, am I buying into this guy's fantasy, I then have to take that mantle on myself, and that has to become a thing that I care about for the rest of my life. Yeah. And so, to me, it makes way more sense to just, like, de-escalate this however I can, and I'm not gonna buy into the fantasy that this is a thing that matters. You have decided that it matters to you. I don't have to decide that it matters to me.
Yeah. I love that, actually. Not only does he choose to be a good role model for the students that are around him, but I think he's also not willing to risk their personal safety by, like,
if you get into a brawl in a room with little kids in it, come on.
And I think it's important what you just pointed out. At no point is it important for Leroy to achieve mastery or the glow by being the toughest guy in Letterkenny. That's never presented as, like, a path that he thinks is the way to go. He is one-track minded and very committed to this idea of seeking wisdom and becoming the master and achieving transcendence. And in some ways, you can say that Shonuff is also focused on this idea of mastery, but they have two wildly different views of what that means.
Shonuff requires, like, that external validation in the form of, can I physically dominate other people? That's the only metric he knows how to use, whereas I think this movie is arguing that physical force is a tool that you use to defend other people and not just to, like, increase your own status. That's not a thing that means anything in the ethos of this movie.
But in the next scene, we see Leroy training on a rooftop above his family's apartment building, practicing some form of moving meditation, and when he climbs back down to join the family for breakfast, Richie lets him know just how annoyed he is by his constant weirdness. This would include his recent refusal to fight, as well as referring to his mom and dad as honorable mother and father, and presenting his baby sister with some sort of strange trinket of a gift that she just, like, doesn't quite know what to do with. And in a lovely scene that subverted my expectations, Daddy Green defends Leroy's weirdness by explaining how the whole neighborhood once thought he was weird for being a black man who dreamed of owning his own pizza shop.
That's such a New York kind of problem.
The boys have evidently heard this follow the beat of your own drum narrative before, and Richie, at least, seems unimpressed. Besides, he's too focused on a commercial advertising a contest to win a date with Laura Charles.
Back in the day when you could just raffle off a woman.
Yeah.
Like a famous woman.
And when Leroy sees the woman he recognizes as the person he recently helped avoid trouble, he becomes interested as well. Of course, Leroy is mostly thinking about how much he needs to get his missing Bruce Lee amulet back. But Richie and his parents don't know that.
Yeah.
What did you make of this scene where Leroy's parents seem so shocked that he's interested in a woman? And how did you rate their reaction, given that they might be uncertain of of their son's sexuality.
Oh, yeah, that was absolutely the read. There is this scene, they're having this conversation, like, Richie's talking about, like, oh, he's so weird, and, like, he doesn't even care about women. Isn't that weird? And his parents sort of, like, exchange this look of, well, you know, we love him, he's our son, and everything's fine. Like, they do that thing where it's like, don't react to that. And then when he sees the woman on TV and he's like, oh, and he seems, like, excited about her, they exchange this other look of, like, oh, well, what do you know?
Well,
all right.
That's a shocker.
Okay, well, we had all of those conversations and we really made our peace with some things, and I'm glad we did that as parents, but you know what? Maybe we didn't. Maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what? We're still not going to say anything.
Not gonna say
Either
anything.
way, totally fine.
We're just going to share some shit-eating grins and just eat our toast. That's what we're going to do right now.
It's very, like, subtle. I don't know if that was meant to be read as a, like, okay, we thought he was gay. Maybe he's not. Or, like, whatever.
Yeah.
We thought maybe he just wasn't interested in romance. All right, maybe he is. Like, that's just how it struck me, but I did think it was very charming.
I feel like it almost has to be because, like, this movie really just didn't make any bones about including all sorts of, like, extras that we 21st century audiences would read now as like trans and just a variety of just like
I mean,
what you call
New York
clam.
in the 80s.
Yeah, like I don't think anyone, you know, who's paying attention and living there, you know, would be shocked to think that my, you know, adolescent boy could like other boys. Like,
yeah, it's not unlike people in maybe other parts of the country. I don't think the people of New York were, like, shocked to find that a boy could like other boy. Like, however they felt about it, they'd be like, well, yeah, like, that's a thing.
Instead, we don't get that. We get Daddy Green, who's saying, oh, you want to be different? Be different.
All right.
Be a black man that owns a pizza shop.
The most different thing you can be.
Yeah. So I don't know. I
Eat your popcorn with chopsticks. You're not hurting anybody.
I would love to know what other people think, but maybe I'm giving the movie too much credit, but I don't think so.
That was absolutely. I think I said that while we were watching it. I was like, oh, they thought he was gay.
Yeah.
And they're like, huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, interesting.
You know who's not so accepting?
The rest of society.
Yes. True. But also his equally weird and way too mature for his own good little brother, Richie.
Yeah, I like Richie.
Everyone loves.
Funny.
If you don't like Richie, you can just get out. After breakfast, the boys open up Daddy Green's pizza shop. Richie, interested in taking his older brother on a trip to the old raspberry patch, gives him a rather discouraging lowdown on how much Leroy doesn't know about sex with women. Despite all of this, Leroy insists that his little brother let him come along to the recording studio so he can have a chance of retrieving his amulet. Richie agrees to take Leroy to the dance contest only after humiliating him. He tells Leroy to kiss his hand, give him a ride on his shoulders, try to rap, etc., etc. Watching Leroy try to rap is a special kind of...
It's no good.
It's so bad.
He's good at some things and not so good at others.
Finally, Richie agrees and says he has some kind of insider access to the studio where the two of them won't have to worry about purchasing tickets at the door. As Richie disappears through a side entrance, he insists that Leroy not identify as his brother. Don't embarrass me, man. While waiting for Richie to find a way in, Leroy witnesses Laura being, can you guess? Abducted.
Again.
This
is maybe the funniest part of the movie to me because just no one has ever been more nonchalant about being abducted violently multiple times. Laura does not, like, she's inconvenienced at worst.
Yeah.
She's, like, never particularly frightened, it doesn't seem like.
Comes with the territory.
Just like, again? Okay.
This time, she is snatched up in a van by the henchman and former boxer, Rock. As if the kidnapping isn't bad enough, Eddie Arkadian forces Laura to watch Angie's silly and terrible music video mentioned earlier in the film, Dirty Books.
The premise of which is, I believe, the sort of main character of the song, who is Angie, has, like, found dirty books, like, under someone's bed.
Right.
It's either a stand-in for dirty magazines, which is definitely the vibe of the music video, or just somebody has got some like fantasy erotica. There, like she just found the copy of Fourth Wing under the bed or whatever, and is like, I can't believe you're reading this smut, and writes like a pop song about it. Yeah. It's so strange.
I do think it's supposed to be Playboys, but it's like
I think so too.
It does just say dirty books.
Yes.
Like what?
And to be clear, it's not like Angie is like a bad singer.
No.
She's like a perfectly fine singer. It's that like very sort of auto-tuned 80s music, but it's just truly the dumbest content for a song I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Until we get to the song later.
Well, and again, this is kind of where it's weird because like the whole claim to fame for Motown was creating a popified R&B that was like close enough to disco but far enough away from it to just turn into like number one hits.
Yeah.
Like it was a hit-making enterprise. That was the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
And so like what we're seeing from her performance is just like not an artist trying to do art, but someone who is trying to produce something, a product for money. And that person who is producing it is Eddie Arcadian.
Yeah. This is not Angie's passion project. No. She was told what to sing and she went out and did it.
Yeah. So once again, though, to Laura's credit, she refuses to air it on her show. Before Eddie can harm her in retaliation, Leroy busts in a freaking ninja outfit and beats the shit out of everyone.
Yeah.
And yes, here it comes. Chekhov's shark mutant. He puts Eddie right in the shark tank, but pulls him away right before the freaking mutant can bite his face off or whatever. Because I don't think that Leroy knew there was
anything
killer.
In there. Yeah.
But yeah, I just wrote roll credits. The villain gets his face bitten off. End of movie. Done.
If only.
Not quite. Just kidding. Although there is some symmetry here of Eddie having a near-death experience in the water and the ultimate transformation of Leroy via violent baptism, but we'll get to that.
Oh, Lord.
I know.
Okay.
I mean, a little bit. Like
later.
I just wrote about that because, like, this is definitely the defining moment where Eddie goes from being just like, well, I'm white and you have to do what I say. I'm a very important businessman, to being a absolute psychopath, like a cartoon villain.
Yeah. And, I mean, if you are going to baptize someone, I do suggest finding water that doesn't have a shark mutant in it, but I don't want to tell you how to live the truth of your faith.
Yeah. I mean, but anyway, I just wrote that this is where Eddie becomes a purely violent force bent on revenge, a truly megalomaniacal psychopath willing to do anything to destroy Leroy. So his previous focus was help Angie, or more to the point, like embarrass Laura, or
strong-arm
Laura. But now he is all about punishing Leroy for making him look like a punk.
Yeah.
So anyway, Leroy escorts Laura back to her apartment. Wait.
Nope.
Oh, yeah. For some of that smooth move loving. No, because he didn't learn any moves yet. He didn't learn how to use his paintbrush, as Richie was teasing him.
As Richie pointed out, he doesn't know what to do with a woman.
Wouldn't know what to do.
Other than escort her safely home.
Other than to be
not bother her after that.
Yeah, a perfectly fine gentleman. Takes her back to the apartment where they formally introduce themselves because they've become well acquainted, but not on a name basis yet. It becomes clear that Laura is interested in her guardian angel mystery man. Who wouldn't be? What a dreamboat.
I mean, if I had gotten kidnapped twice and the same man, by pure happenstance, happened to save me both times, I'd be like, all right, what is this? Yeah. Who are you?
And he, though, is increasingly nervous, thinking of his social awkwardness and romantic inexperience that Richie so helpfully pointed out earlier. Leroy does successfully retrieve the lost medallion and continues his search for some dumb goy in Chinatown, only to find a fortune cookie factory bearing that name. Bum, bum, bum. This is where things get very silly. 3 Chinese dudes tell him that if he wants wisdom, buy a fortune cookie, man. And that the master is busy.
They're just like out on the street. Are they break dancing, or are they? What are they doing when he first comes up?
I say that this is yet another silly scene playing off of Black and Asian stereotypes, because these 3 Asian characters are introduced, as you just said, attempting to break dance.
Yeah.
And
sort of breakdancing.
They're trying their darndest, and like the movie leaves it up to you, the viewer, to determine whether or not they're doing a good job. But our first impression in seeing them is like, oh, they're dance? Is that how they did it? Is that breakdancing? Is this breakdancing?
Is it breakdancing? Yeah, it's they're playing music outside the factory, and they're doing something, and that's how we meet them.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is ultimately this, like, so they're breakdancing, they're talking in their like super cool way until Leroy just doesn't seem to get it, and so ultimately they decide to communicate with him in this like affected pidgin instead of their what feels to them more authentic like jive New Yorker speak.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's what gets him to understand and go away. But they're like joking on, yet again, Leroy's assumptions about what he's going to find in Chinatown and the master, and like, and it becomes clear later like why they're sort of making this joke and what they're playing it up to. But anyway, I just wanted to know, how'd you like these clowns? We see them again. We get plenty more sort of goofs revolving around these Asian American men trying to affect African American cultural markers of cool. So much, in fact, that they see Leroy as a joke for his adoption of what he perceives to be Chinese tendencies related to piety, discipline, and metaphysical balance. So what was your sort of first impression of these guys?
Well, it's just another way that this movie is playing with stereotypes. And I mean, this is less overt than the Johnny character being like, people see that I'm Asian and just assume I'm really good at martial arts.
Yeah.
They are instead kind of flipping it around, having a foil to Leroy, who is, you know, affecting certain behaviors and aesthetics, and they are just doing the same thing, but the mirrored version of it.
Yeah.
And I think it is there because they're never particularly fleshed out. It does feel like it's there, to be a sort of joke about what the viewer's expectations about, you know, stereotypical Chinese characters would be, and also to kind of poke more fun at Leroy as a character. To be like, isn't it kind of strange to see someone affecting a stereotype of your community and then parroting it back to you? Like, we're both kind of doing something strange here, don't you think?
Right. Well, Leroy gets his turn later, so we'll return and talk about those guys, but I do love them. Meanwhile, though, at Daddy Green's pizza shop, Sho Nuff shows up, and he's up to no good. He and his gang decide to wreck the place to send a message to Leroy suggesting that they will continue to make his life hell until he answers the challenge Sho Nuff has issued. Richie chastises Leroy as a coward and says, "Meditate on that," derisively.
He sure does. Yep,
I believe he says this from a trash can that he's been stuffed into,
he was stuffed
full
into
of spaghetti.
The trash can. Yeah. This scene is pretty sad.
It's actually really sad. Yeah. The question I had for you is, like, at this point, Leroy has been called out in public, witnessed this gang getting violent with his students, and seen that they're willing to hurt his family. Is he being a coward by remaining a pacifist? Because, like, when I say they wrecked place, they came in, they threatened his mom and dad, they hurt his brother, they broke windows, they destroyed property, they smashed an arcade machine, a jukebox. Like, this is expensive damage, and I believe that given another chance, they would have done more violence to the people there too. Like, I don't think anything prevented them other than just like they didn't want to at that moment. So
yeah. I mean, no, I still don't think he's being a coward because Sho Nuff's feelings are still not his responsibility. He didn't do anything to this man to make him react the way that he is reacting. And if anything, there needs to be more sort of community support for people. Like, I don't know, it's kind of the Karate Kid thing, but the opposite version where it's like, I don't know that physically fighting that guy in your parents' pizza restaurant does anything to prevent him from continuing to be violent in the future.
Yeah.
I think you beat him in a fight, he's just as angry, and now he like goes and gets a gun.
I mean, in real life, certainly.
It just doesn't seem like, and that can't be the message that you tell people, that like if someone follows you around enough and is mean to you enough and is violent towards you and the people you care about enough, you have an obligation to physically fight them.
Yeah.
It's just not this guy's responsibility to stop this guy. And like, again, you shouldn't have to, like, literally risk your life to protect anybody's property, even your parents.
Yeah.
Like, it's a systemic failure. This movie doesn't really deal with why isn't there any authority in this world that can prevent people from doing things like this to other people? Why did the people in the movie theater have to physically fight them themselves instead of calling someone who might be able to deal with a problem like this? Why isn't there anybody reliable who can do that?
Yeah.
That's the problem with these sort of systemic failures, is that then this pressure gets put on individual people to protect themselves and their families. And, you know, like, these things just spiral. And I think he's smart to say, like, no, I'm not going to entertain this until it gets to a point where, like, in the logic of the movie, it has gotten bad enough. But also at that point, like, other people start getting involved. We'll get to that. Like, it's not smart for Leroy to do anything until he has backup.
Yeah.
Just logistically.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I hear what you're saying. And, like, I guess I would clarify by saying, like, I don't think that... I like that you said community support, right? I don't think there needs to be a violent, quote unquote, peacekeeping force that's the ultimate authority and, like, law and order.
Right. That's not what I'm saying either.
Right.
But it can't be down to, like, if a guy tries to fight you, you have nothing to do but, I guess, train to physically fight him or get a bigger weapon than he has. Like, that's an individual arms race that doesn't work either.
Right. No, and I just wanted to clarify that because I don't think the solution would be what a lot of people would think is, like, oh, well, you need to call the police. And it's like, no, actually not. That's like, could yield a worse problem. This film, because it's a Motown production, is, like, fairly friendly to police. And when police do finally show up, they're just like, oh, book 'em, Dano. And, like, that's it. But what we really see as the sort of triumphant end here is exactly what you said, a community coming together to both stand up to a problem and, I would think, in the symbolism of what Leroy realizes, figure out a way to rehabilitate it, not, perpetuate violence. And so, but we'll get there. I asked the question here because Leroy shows up to the pizza shop after everything is smashed. Richie chews him out. He's feeling bad about it. And in the very next scene, we can see that he is, we see an angry Leroy clearly wrestling with these questions of, am I a coward? Should I do something? Should I go and fight him? Like, what am I supposed to do? Because he's venting his frustrations on the heavy bag. He's just, like, going to town on a heavy bag, sweating, glistening, godlike. But also, I this is one of the quotes that I wrote down because he's thrashing away and reciting a mantra. And so it's like he is trying to find peace and reach a point where he can make a clear decision, and, like, he's trying to prevent himself from acting rashly out in the world. And so this is like a meditative act, but he says, Chinese Goju is our secret. May God help me if I ever have to use my art. Love is my law. Truth is our worship. Form is our manifestation. Conscience is our guide. Peace is my shelter. And I'm like, yes. Yes, Leroy. Like, it's just so amazing because, like, we see this foil throughout the film of Shonuff asserting himself as the baddest man in town by doing violent things and breaking shit. And we see Leroy doubting whether or not he is even qualified to be a master because he struggles with maintaining his cool and finding peace and creating beauty. And, like, ultimately that's what sets them apart. And it's, I love the scene so much, but he's clearly going through it. But after this intense bit of working out his frustrations, Laura shows up and asks Leroy to be her bodyguard. Will you guard my body?
With your body?
Unfortunately, though, he does refuse because he's still fixated on his medallion quest. But never fear, Johnny Yu is here. Mostly he just shows up to be silly.
Yeah, not that good at martial arts, pretty good as a wingman.
Yeah, exactly. While Leroy is struggling with his conscience, Eddie has fully abandoned his own and is auditioning a variety of murderous thugs to hunt down Leroy. But of course...
Literally auditioning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's, like, sitting there at a table interviewing them.
What are your qualifications?
Yeah, seriously, it's very silly.
How many people have you killed?
But of course there's one that stands out among the rest. One who wants to hurt Leroy so bad he doesn't even want to get paid. Show enough.
Well, clearly Shonuff doesn't need money. He's paying all these models to stand around him at all times.
I guess, or they're paying him for the privilege. Who knows? He is the Shogun of Harlem, so.
No. Is he? He hasn't proven that yet. Why is that's why he's so mad. He hasn't even proven that yet.
Yeah, that's his whole thing is like, he's not filled with self-confidence either. That's why he surrounds himself with sycophants that chant his name. Like
Pokemon.
Yeah, it's wild. Angie, meanwhile, is recording her new terrible song, Test Drive. Beep, beep.
Is this the scene where she's like dressed like a bus or something, or like a taxi,
like a traffic cone or a traffic light, or like she's got headlights on her headlights.
Yeah, and the models standing around her are maybe dressed like the bus.
They're all wearing like reflective gear.
It's not good.
It's very silly.
God, I mean. I'm glad that Angie's story plays out the way that it does, because if this was kind of where it ended for her, I would be like, I can't conscience this. This is unacceptable.
This was actually the scene in the movie where I realized, oh my God, Kelcee has to watch this, because she's recording this horrible music video, and then Eddie, in a speech that every girl longs to hear, explains that all the violence and threatening is, quote, for her.
Yeah, isn't that romantic, ladies?
Yeesh.
Don't you love it when your man is like, look at how many people I've murdered for you? And you're like, he'll never murder me, though.
Angie straight up says she doesn't want Eddie to kill anybody. He says, nobody does what he did to me and lives. All but directly contradicting his previous statements of sadistic devotion, right? So he's just immediately taking back, like, I'm doing this for you. Well, she just gave you a request, bud.
She's
you're like, well, fuck that.
Don't do that for me. And he's like, well, actually, it's for me. And she's like, well, okay, yeah. I mean, I know. All of this has been for you, Eddie. You haven't asked me a question this whole movie.
And so Angie then accuses him of, quote, using me to get what you want. Eddie retorts that she can walk away anytime she wants. And she does!
Yes, she does.
This was the moment when Angie actually really surprised me as a character. And I should have printed this out for you, but Kelcee, would you do me the honor of reenacting one of the best scenes in this movie?
Yes.
Okay, I'll be Eddie, and you can be Angie.
Oh, okay.
All right, so get in your Angie headspace. You ready?
Okay.
So Eddie goes, where you gonna go, Angie? Without me, you're nothing. Without that outfit, you're just another no-talent dental hygiene school dropout from Kew Gardens getting by on her tits.
And in the end, Eddie, you know what? You're nothing but a misguided midget asshole with dreams of ruling the world. Yeah, also from Kew Gardens, and also getting by on my tits.
Mic drop.
It's fantastic.
It's actually like sincerely good acting too. Like she's kind of like tearing up as she says it, because this is their like breakup moment and her sort of cathartic realization of like, well, I don't need this crazy asshole.
Yeah, I've never wanted this, and you can't do this part of it without me. Right. So fuck you.
It was so good. Yeah, that was definitely the moment. I was sort of just like, well, Laura's kind of cool. Like, she's solid, I guess. But then, like, this part
certainly
right here.
Unflappable. Laura, unflappable. Angie, flappable, but also, like, arguably much braver in this moment for being like, I just heard this man talk about how he's auditioning murderers. Yeah. And I'm about to turn my back on him.
I guess what I like about both of them, we were talking already about subverting expectations.
Yeah.
And Laura is clearly supposed to be the damsel in distress.
Yeah. And refuses to be distressed.
She's like, what? Again? I have work.
Yeah. God, I have places to be.
And Angie is supposed to be the ditzy femme fatale, I guess, like the sort of just side piece to a
Bond
maniac.
Girl, essentially, who's just, or not a Bond girl.
Kind of, though. Like, I expected her to do the thing where she was going to, like, try and seduce Leroy and Jezebel entrapment him or something. But
or just, like, the equivalent of the girls who are standing around Shonuff, who are just, like, set pieces, essentially.
Leroy comes to visit Laura and apologizes, explaining that he must complete his mission before becoming her bodyguard. It's here that we learn a bit more about the transcendent state Leroy and his master described earlier in the film as the glow. Leroy says this is a way of being where the spirit guides the body without thought. He explains that some fighters have been able to channel the glow into just their fists or their feet to wield unimaginable destructive power. But Leroy fantasizes about circulating the glow throughout the whole body and how this could lead to unfathomable beauty. Laura calls this a lovely dream. Then, remembering himself, Leroy thinks to ask Laura for some advice for his friend and awkwardly stumbles through questions about moves and a paintbrush.
All of this being euphemism for like, how do you get with the lady? What do the ladies like?
And to her credit, I think Laura's like driving him around in a convertible right now.
There's just like wind in her hair.
And she just looks at him and goes, I'd love to show him some moves sometime. Actually, at this point, I guess like he asked for it. That'd be weird and kind of taunting if she was like, oh, I'll show your friend some moves.
Yeah.
No, she says she'll show him some moves. Richie waits outside of the Seventh Heaven studio to impress Laura with moves of his own, specifically his rapping abilities. He's been practicing his raps all day.
Is this the part where we are introduced to Richie's friends?
The little rascals of
there's some little rascals going around with Richie, and they're very cute. Yeah. They're just all very charming. And one of them says another very important line later, but we'll get to that.
That's true. I'm glad you remembered that. That's very true. So he's waiting to impress Laura, but meanwhile, inside the studio, Laura is there with Leroy playing some silly Motown joints accompanied by a variety of Bruce Lee movie clips to impress her boy. It's very cool.
Those are the moves. You got to be like, oh, you're into Bruce Lee. I just so happen to have just a reel of Bruce Lee clips right here, all queued up. So weird. I just had this ready to go.
My specific note here at this point in the movie is, quote, the glow song is so ridiculous. Quote, when you reach the upper level, your mind, body, and soul will be one.
It's very literal. The song in the back. I mean, it's a song they wrote for this movie.
You
so
are
it's
the
just
last dragon. You got the power and the glow.
No, it's the power of the glow.
You got the power of the glow. Anyway, Laura kisses Leroy.
Very sexy music is what we're saying.
It's the sexiest music because Laura kisses Leroy just as Richie and his friends sneak in and witness from the balcony. But before we have a chance to feel sorry for young Richie's first major heartbreak and the betrayal he feels from his brother, wouldn't you know it again, that mean old Eddie Arcadian kidnaps Laura again!
Third time in the movie. And this one, she is a little like, oh, come on.
Yeah. But somewhere in between is that...
I was trying to get something going here at the Arcadian.
That, I think the way it really shakes out is like Richie gasps, and then starts shouting at Laura and Leroy.
Yeah, and they like come apart.
Right.
Like there's a commotion.
Richie runs out. I think Leroy goes to try and find him. That's when we see this cute little scene of Richie's friends saying something to him. Do you remember what his buddy said?
I don't remember the exact wording, but as they're like running out of the studio and he's like, I can't believe she would do that with my stupid brother. He doesn't even have, this is terrible.
Yeah. And he doesn't even know how to rap.
And one of his friends, who's again like, I don't know, 10 to 12, is just sort of like, but if she likes him, then like we should respect that.
Yeah.
Like she chose him. He must be good.
Yeah.
Like they must be good for each other. We should respect her choices.
He goes, yeah, it looks like she chose him to me. So I don't know. I guess that's that. It's like, she has agency.
It's even more, I think it's affirmative. Like, yeah, that's what she chose. Like we have to respect her choices.
It's just funny
because a very
because
enlightened 12-year-old boy from New York
who just looks like the kid from the Goonies. Like it's very Goonies vibe, but like with some real wisdom there. Again, subverting expectations. You expect all the 12-year-olds in the movie to be, as horned, bald, and silly as Richie, but no, they're just like giving him some real talk.
Like, hey, come on, man. She makes her own choices in this life,
Yeah. So, of course, though, Eddie only gets away with his scheme this time because Leroy is back in Chinatown seeking wisdom from some of my favorite characters in the whole film. The three jive Chinese Americans we saw breakdancing before are now arguing over the rules of dice. Leroy gets nowhere with them by being his polite self, so, in order to learn more of the mysterious master, Sum Dum Goy, Leroy hatches a clever ploy to disguise himself as a soul brother pizza delivery guy.
Oh, God.
Surprisingly, this seems to work. The boys from Chinatown say if he teaches them to play craps, then they'll introduce him to the master. Meanwhile, Angie comes to the gym looking for Leroy and finds Johnny.
Yep.
She finds Johnny instead. She warns him that Eddie has gone crazy and that Leroy needs to stay away from Seventh Heaven. When we cut away to the studio, we see that both Richie and Laura are tied up. The song Fire by Charlene plays, and Eddie wonders, rather manically, that's my polite way of saying, like, he's foaming at the mouth, like, watching her perform, about becoming her manager. And so, like, this is the sort of clue of, like, he doesn't care about Angie, he doesn't care about anyone, he only cares about himself and, like, how he can use people. And, like, credit to this actor for just, like, visibly looking like he's having a breakdown. Like, he's just, I mean... This scene is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Anyway, Leroy teaches the Chinatown boys to play craps, quote, just like we do it in Harlem. Of course, Leroy is bluffing, but he's an excellent improviser. He actually teaches them how to play hopscotch. He sees them like roll the dice and then they're like hopping around. This is one of the best gags in the whole flick, in my opinion. Finally, he shows them the medallion and demands to see the master. After some light intimidation when they, don't want to, or they start making fun of him, they finally tell him, there is no master. We made it up to sell more fortune cookies.
Yeah.
Sum Dum Goy is a computer conveyor belt spitting out randomly generated wisdom, quote unquote. Upon this discovery, Leroy seeks out his old teacher to ask, quote, why have you sent me to find someone who does not exist? Because he's a mean old man, that's why.
And he wants to go see his mother in Florida.
The teacher explains by giving him an empty fortune cookie. Quote, it contains everything you need, then laughs and begs him to think. Think, Leroy. What could it mean?
What could it mean?
Of course,
was the fortune inside you all along?
As we have likely realized at this point, he also reveals that the charm was fake, never really belonging to Bruce Lee at all.
What?
I know. Did you see that one coming? Yeah. When Leroy still doesn't understand why the teacher would trick him, he explains that, quote, there is one place that you have not looked, and it is only there that you will find the master.
In the Hudson River.
Yeah.
He's down there, Leroy.
So, as he said in the very beginning of the film, this teacher said something to the effect of, like, the cycle is complete, creating a new emptiness to be filled with knowledge, right? So, like, as he's telling Leroy, like, you're a master now, I'm no longer your teacher, he says something like that. What did you think about this whole, like, again, a subverting of the hero's journey subplot, like sending Leroy on this empty quest? Do you think it was, like, something that he actually needed? Was it an interesting side bit? Do you think it was enlightening for the audience, or did you think it was just, like, a vehicle for silly gags? And, I mean, because to me, it actually reminds me of some, like, Taekwondo philosophy that I try to teach specifically before students are preparing to train for their black belt test. Mm-hmm. So I was just curious, what did you think about the whole reveal that there is no master in Chinatown and it's a fake medallion, and actually what he finds is a machine printing out, these sort of, like, again, orientalized koans or, like, fake literal fake fortune cookie wisdom, like, and then, like, that symbol of him, the master, handing Leroy an empty fortune cookie.
I mean, I think it is tying back to this journey that Leroy has sort of been on in regard to the sort of external aesthetics of this martial art that he has chosen to practice, where he is sort of looking for an external source of validation. He wants people, when they look at him, to think he knows certain things and to make certain assumptions. Mm-hmm. And he wants that sort of external validation from his teacher at the beginning. And I think it's a sort of way of saying, like, you need to go test some of these philosophies out in the real world, first of all.
It's good. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And just, like, I mean, I don't know that it is, like, a complete subversion of the hero's journey. I think the hero's journey is a lot of the going on the journey is, like, what fills the void, right? Like, it's not that, King Arthur became great because he had a sword. He got the sword and went on adventures, and that is how he became great, sort of thing. He didn't he was looking for more of a sort of like external validation, and like, I can get a new belt and the belt will mean that I can do X, Y, and Z, and the belt will signify something and the belt will mean something about me. And I think this is the teacher's way of saying, like, we can sit here, the two of us, in this studio forever, and I can keep teaching you new, like, moves to do with your body. But if you want to be a master, first of all, you need to figure out what it means to be a master, and you can't do that in here. And second of all, you need to go out and use the art. Like, go out into the world and practice. It's a practice. Go do something. It's not something you're just supposed to lock yourself up in a room and do over and over again to no real end.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I thought specifically of the first and last form that we teach in my style of Taekwondo. And so, like, think about that rooftop scene where he's doing this, like, moving meditation, right? These kinds of physical exercises that are tied to philosophical meaning, specifically to have that kind of moment, like when he's hitting the heavy bag, where he's reciting his mantra and tying this physical catharsis with a mental meditation, sort of emotional release as well. So the very basic form that you learn, the first one, a little bit of choreography is very simple, but it is meant to represent, in terms of yin and yang, it's pure yang energy. And so we say that it teaches us about creativity. It's purely creative energy. Whereas the last form you learn right before being eligible to test for a black belt, which in Taekwondo just means a trained student. There's levels above that before you become a master instructor. But still, like, it means you know the basics, and it means you can help a brand new student, right? You can be a leader. But the last step, instead of infinite creative energy, is to harness infinite receptive energy, total yin. And the reason for that is exactly what this teacher said in the beginning, which is like, and it's what you just said too, like, when you're new, you can learn all of these new ways to express yourself through your body. You can learn all of these techniques. You can create something brand new because you don't have anything yet. But when you've been training for a long time and you're prepared to take it to the next level, you have to remember how to be receptive to new knowledge. You can't just think, oh, I did it. I'm fully formed. I know it all, and now I just get to use it. It's like, no, that's a huge mistake. You know some things, but part of this journey is to remind you that it's a lifelong learning process. And like, to me, I think that that's a key part of understanding mastery is, as a teacher, as a student, I'm both of those things my whole life, and you never stop learning, you never stop growing, you never stop changing. And so I really liked it. I thought a little bit more so than other movies that do this, like, the magic was inside of you all along. It's like, well, kind of, but like, the belief in yourself wasn't there.
Yeah.
What you said, I think, is really good. Your ability to do things in the gym is certainly there. Your ability to exercise discretion and, like, ethically utilize your skills and knowledge out in the real world maybe wasn't there because you didn't practice it. Like, you weren't really part of a community. You were just this weird oddball that was content being weird and alone, essentially. Like, part of what we see as his growth is like learning to be, more in touch with his family that is different from him, learning to develop a relationship with someone like Laura, and learning to deal with just like out and out bullies like Shonuff and these like horrible representatives of oppressive systems like Eddie Arcadian.
Yeah, especially like that mantra that he's saying, like having a commitment to an idea like peace and like self-control and those things. Like, I too ideologically have a commitment to the ideas of peace and self-control, but what that means when you're alone in a gym or you're with one other person means something very different than when you're in a classroom full of children and a violent stranger walks in and tries to fight you. Like, those are situations, I mean, hopefully most people are never in a situation where someone tries to fight them in a room full of children. But
it's happened to me more than once.
That's true. So it does happen. But, you have to take your principles out into the real world. And one of the themes for Leroy is that he is so naive. Like, it's obviously like, it's not nice to tease people about their romantic inexperience, but that's another way that this film is saying this guy has things that he believes in that he has never had to put into practice before.
Yeah.
And so part of becoming a master is like walking the walk a little bit.
So he walks the walk right into the climax of the film because
hell yeah, he does.
When Leroy learns where Laura and Richie are, he suits up to head out.
Yeah.
We get this classic, you talk about not subverting the hero's journey. He goes and like dons the uniform and is like getting weapons and stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, and this is at least a moment where, again, we're talking about like this is a world where like there is no functional police force, much like the real world.
Yeah.
He knows that a cute enough thing has happened that you now need to act. And it's not just like sometimes a guy shows up and like tries to get me to fight him out of nowhere. That's a very different situation than like a dangerous thing is happening to two people I care about and like there isn't anyone else to ask, so I have to go. That's in my mind those are different things. Even though again this is sort of a strange heightened like a weird criminal mastermind has kidnapped your sort of girlfriend and little brother, but...
Well, it's drawing an important distinction. Early in the film, Leroy's ego and pride might be hurt in the movie theater in the scene where he has to kiss the Converse. So it's like, one, he's embarrassed in public. Two, he's embarrassed in front of people that he really cares about and made to look weak. Neither of those warrant physical violence to Leroy. He struggles really with this, like, should I do something to Shonuff retroactively after I notice that he's destroyed the pizzeria, threatened my family, and hurt my little brother? And he ultimately decides, no, ultimately it's just property. This, bruises will heal. It's okay. It's still just like some idiot flexing. But this is very much a time-sensitive manner where two people that he cares about are in active danger. Yeah. Specifically because, and he's been made aware of, if he does not act, they will be hurt or killed. Yeah. So what choice does he have? Like,
yeah. Well, and the thing that spurs his action is not a person like Shonuff, whose approach for the most part up to that point has been like, I'm going to try to intimidate this guy and try to hit him in terms of his ego and like, again, he could have really hurt his family if he wanted to. He destroys their property as a way of saying, this is me menacing you. Eddie Arcadian takes much more direct action because Eddie Arcadian is a different sort of villain.
Well, it's like, it's worth pointing out, I think Shonuff wants Leroy to fight him. He wants...
Yeah. He also has this sort of sense of, as truly out there a character as Shonuff is, he has a sense of fair play. He's basically trying to challenge him to a duel.
Right. Whereas
Eddie Arcadian is kidnapping women and tying them to railroad tracks. Yeah. Like, these are two different sort of classical villain archetypes.
Eddie's whole bit is to lure Leroy into a trap where he can then kill him. He's willing to use people as a bargaining chip. He doesn't, you know what I mean? Like his whole goal
that was his original goal with Laura too. He sent one half-hearted like, hey, can you show this video? And then he went straight to kidnap her.
Right.
When you have the machine of power and money behind you, it's a different level of violence, and it does occasionally take more direct action. Whereas again, with Shonuff, there is a little bit of like, God, maybe if I ignore him long enough, he'll just go away.
So Leroy's suiting up. Johnny wishes to fight alongside his teacher, but Leroy worries for his friend's safety and traps Johnny in a weapon closet so he can't follow him.
I wish he hadn't done that.
Well, like, what are you going to do? We already know that Johnny can't really
That's
fight.
True.
Like,
Johnny's not good at fighting.
Like, thankfully, though, a little kung fu kid
round up the posse, though. Send Johnny to round up the posse. It's a Western now.
Thankfully, though, a little kung fu kid who we've maybe seen one other time in the movie so far frees Johnny as Leroy attempts to sneak into the studio. Of course, Big Boss Eddie knows he's taken the bait and taunts him on the big screen before introducing the mercenary murder hobo army he's hired for the big bad fight. Leroy is outnumbered until his students come in to back him up for an all-out brawl, mixing high-flying kicks and Motown hits and breakdancing flips. And so this is the bringing in the posse as you said. But Leroy didn't want that, and that indicates like I don't think a kind of arrogance. Like he just doesn't want anybody else to get hurt. Like he's fine with him getting hurt. I think. I don't think he even goes into this thinking that he can necessarily win. He just doesn't want Laura and Richie to get hurt because of him.
Yeah. I pointed out because the movie wants you to think that's noble. But, like, yeah, he would have gotten murdered by a gang of murderers, and then Laura and Richie obviously also would have. It's just not a good plan to show up to a fight where you're outnumbered. But again, like, this is why I said earlier that the community is what makes all the difference here.
Right. Eddie doesn't have a community behind him. He has hired goons and thugs. Like,
he doesn't have any kind of loyalty built on anything real.
He has weird mercenary people. Some of them are sadists enough to fight just because they want to, and they're weird. But most of them are just there because they're getting paid. Everyone else is there fighting for their teacher, fighting for their community, fighting for their friends. I love this scene too. Richie is able to pop and lock his way out of the ropes that bind him.
It's very cool. The dance moves come back in.
And the Kung Fu Kid demonstrates some fantastical b-boy power moves while fighting. Seeing that the tides of battle are turning, Eddie initiates Plan B, taunting Leroy and luring him to an abandoned warehouse while holding Laura at gunpoint. Eddie starts firing his pistol and shit gets real. This is the first gun we've had the whole movie. Which normally does sort of break a kung fu movie, you know, like as soon as there are guns, just like the original Ip Man movie. It's like, oh, it's all fine and good. Like these kung fu masters are fighting. Oh, and then World War II. Oh, and then, dang.
Guess we just don't do this really anymore.
Dang. Rock grabs Richie and gets dick kicked.
Hell yeah, Richie.
Get him.
Good job. Good job.
Shonuff tosses Richie like a sack of potatoes, though, smashing his head against a pipe. And
I thought Richie was dead.
I literally thought Richie was dead.
This was so gnarly. Yeah. He throws him just to like a pile of scrap metal.
It's bad. But don't worry, he's just a bit concussed and conscious enough to still want to save Laura himself. What a cutie. But only Leroy is up to the task.
So uncomfortable from Laura's perspective, though. Just like,
probably.
Oh, this 12-year-old is like really very age inappropriately interested in me. And he's very serious about it. And now he's going to get himself killed. That's not great.
Well, he takes a little nap because Leroy is the only one up to the task of defeating the final challenger, Shonuff.
Yep.
Shonuff, though, has the glow in his hands and starts beating Leroy to death with supernatural destructive power. Some of the best movie CGI special effects I've ever seen.
It's just sort of like red fuzz.
And then some like weird lightning happens when they hit each other.
Yeah, it's some real sort of...
It's awesome.
Some real Palpatine kind of level CGI.
Shonuff repeatedly demands to know, quote, who's the master? He grabs Leroy's head and dunks it into a barrel of gross warehouse water.
Just everyone's got tetanus.
Just a nasty barrel of water. Attempting to drown him. Instead, Leroy remembers all that he's learned, realizing he is actually the master, now empowered with the glow surging through his whole body. I love this scene with all the water imagery because I think it brings together a number of really important, albeit cross-cultural themes. So, you know, given that this is a movie about Bruce Lee, one of his famous quotes is, "Be water, my friend," you know? Water can fill the cup and it becomes the cup. And of course, like this came from an interview where Bruce Lee was in his showman sort of way, really recirculating Taoist knowledge from Lao Tzu, like the idea that water is formless but can take any form, and that water can be gentle but is sort of constant, and like even a small drip of water over time can drill through granite. It's this really like fascinating sort of image that has captivated martial arts practitioners forever, right? Like the be water concept of flexibility, adaptability. This is also for audiences with any kind of Christian background. Like you think water, you're dunking your head in there, that's a baptism. Maybe we've talked about this on the show before, but like the idea of a baptism is a symbolic death. Like it is like you are drowning the old person, and when you emerge...
The former person.
Well, yeah. Some old ass. Get over here, old man. Get in the barrel. Yeah, the former person is experiencing a metaphorical death so that you can emerge from the water with new life. And, you know, it's sort of evocative of like the covenant, right? Rainwater and the rainbow of Noah, and like this promise that you're making to live a new life. But we frequently see scenes like this where people, especially this one, where he has this extended sort of meditation where he's like holding his breath and like, nearing death anyway, where he emerges as a new person with new powers and this sort of like new realization. And then I think that the way he does sort of pop up out of the barrel also reminds me, because it's like in slow motion, you get this perfect wave sort of, dripping off of him. And I think of the famous painting. Is it just called The Wave? The Great Wave?
Oh, yeah.
Because the whole...
Sorry, I was for sure thinking you were going to say Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
That's funny.
I have to get back into my classical art mode.
The whole point of that painting is you can turn it upside down and the negative space around the wave is the exact same shape. And so if you view it as a circle, what you're seeing is the yin-yang symbol or the Tao, right? And so again, bringing all of these elements together from Taoist philosophy, which is what Leroy has been, cultivating and training in through his Kung Fu practice. What's it called?
It's called Great Wave off Kanagawa.
Yeah. So those are some that I thought were particularly important. And again, it sort of harkens back to Eddie Arkadian having his own sort of dark baptism in his weird Bond lair.
And he comes out more violent.
Yeah. Of course, Leroy is able to defeat Sho'nuff and even saves his adversary from drowning because mercy and the will to preserve life is not weakness. So at the sort of climactic end, Leroy comes up out of the barrel. His whole body is glowing yellow compared to Sho'nuff's hands that are glowing red. And in defeating Sho'nuff, he sort of like passes out, falls face first into probably the same barrel of water.
I think it is the same water.
And Leroy could have just left him there. But takes the time to go and like pull him out. Like he's not going to let him die. That's not what this was about at all. But just as he's reached this marvelous transcendence, Leroy gets shot by Eddie's 45. And that's the actual end of the movie. Kung Fu loses to guns every time.
Yep, roll credits.
Yep.
Why'd you make me watch this movie? It was really sad.
It's pretty sad. Just kidding! As alluded to earlier in the film, Leroy is so bad that he catches the bullet in his teeth.
Yeah!
Yeah, baby. Finally, he's able to hang Eddie out to dry, so he's arrested when the cops show up. So he literally sort of like strings Eddie up on a chain.
Kind of chain.
And it's, I don't know, I don't love the fantasy of this movie is that like cops show up and immediately recognize that Eddie is the one to be arrested, but I wish the world were that way. We all, the audience, know that like this is a crazy person doing awful things, but I think like in real life the cops would show up and shoot Sho'nuff and Leroy and then be like, are you okay, Mr. Arkadian?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, at least in the mythos of this movie, he has just hired every murderer known to man. I mean, if anything, they're going to give him a pardon because they're like, well, you rounded up every murderer in New York, so you kind of did our job for us.
Yeah. So anyway, he is taken down finally, and then in the next scene, Laura is, this is great, hilariously chastised for being late.
Yeah.
Show business waits for no one.
Yeah, no wonder she's like so unfazed by most things. She's like, yeah, my like producer is the meanest person I know. I don't care about you guys. Wave your little gun at me. I don't care. If you shoot me, my producer will eat you alive.
And so we flash back to the dance studio where Laura's looking very demure, very mindful. You can tell I wrote this at a time when...
Was it 6 months ago?
Yeah, I guess.
Demure. Oh, God.
Leroy is in the crowd with flowers, wearing beautiful white and golden dragon robes, shouting, "Show me some moves!" And then Richie finally calls him, quote, "my brother," in defense of a stranger calling him a cornball. Richie says something to the effect of like, "Hey, don't make fun of him. That's my brother."
Yeah.
Which is a nice turnaround for
lovely.
him. Finally, the lovers ascend above the stage as credits roll, for real this time, and all of Harlem lived happily ever after.
Oh, it was beautiful.
You got the power and the glow.
Of the glow.
And the glow. He's got both. He's got the power.
Yeah.
And he's got the glow.
Yeah, and he's got the girl.
And he's got the girl. So, that's my little synopsis of The Last Dragon. You got any things that I skipped over? Any ideas you wanted to shout out? before we move on to our interview with, I was about to say pristine, but I guess I mean prestigious music producer, Ed McClain?
We covered a lot of it. I thought this movie was very charming, and I really was, because you've shown me some martial arts movies in the past that I was like, what?
Yeah.
Is that? Who? Why?
Mm-hmm.
What? Why?
Yeah.
And I was not just pleasantly surprised as a martial arts movie, but I was like, you know what? This is like doing interesting things that I feel like I don't see in movies really at all. I mean, we've talked a lot about like the subverting stereotypes when it comes to like racist stereotypes and things like that. But like, there's no point in this movie where like these two women are mean to each other at all.
Mm-hmm.
The scene where I meant to say it earlier, the scene where Laura gets kidnapped the second time and gets brought back to the lair or whatever to watch the music video, like Angie is just sitting on the couch next to her. And at one point, Laura is like, I mean, it's nothing personal.
Right.
Like, you're clearly a talented person. It's just like, this is not the kind of music that we play on my show. Like, I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to, like, denigrate you as a person or as an artist. I just, like, listen, this is my professional obligation, right? Like, we have a certain genre. But, and it's this whole thing where it's like, they could have just had that be, like, either never have them interact at all, or have it be, like, something very catty and stupid. But, I mean, as with every other moment in this movie where I expected something catty and stupid to happen, it didn't. It was just, like, genuinely nice to see a movie from the 80s where, like, the female characters, other than all of Shonuff's girls, they just were never doing the stereotypical thing. And that's always the thing that kind of makes me, I don't know, cringe the most when I watch a lot of 80s movies, is there's just some real bad depictions of women, but they managed to escape that. And
I had forgotten that particular scene. I think even Angie sort of responds there kindly.
Just like, thank you. That's so nice of you.
Yeah, and then Eddie ruins it, of course.
I didn't write this, so she doesn't say she didn't write the song, but that would have been fun. Just be like, I didn't write it, just so you know. It wasn't me. I didn't do. Yeah. I just put on the weird taxi outfit and danced around.
Yeah. Angie.
But it's a charming movie. It is a little bit of a time capsule in many ways, but yeah, I think the message is rich men are all villains. And Shonuff probably just kind of needed a hug more than anything. Probably would have been okay.
Yeah. We dig a little bit deeper into questions about Shonuff specifically when I talked to Ed. So unless you've got some other things, why don't we just cut on over and see what we have for store in our special guest interview for today.
Take it away, Ed.
All right, for today's show, I am lucky enough to get an exclusive interview with Ed McClain, a.k.a. Black Dad, a hardcore turned wholesome hip-hop artist and father of 8 beautiful children. A natural pick for the podcast. Ed, welcome to the Treehouse. What's up, bro?
It's BLAGHDAD.
Can you say it for me?
It's not Black Dad.
I did not. Well, can you say it?
It's Black Dad.
Black Dad.
What'd you call me? Black Dad. Like
Black Dad.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, it's important to for the listeners to know how to spell it so they can look you up on SoundCloud, on Bandcamp.
Which is funny because I am a Black Dad, but nah.
Yeah.
It's Black Dad.
Today we're talking about Last Dragon, a film that I didn't become interested in until recently, and that was really because of the sort of Bruce Lee connection. And, you know, my love of martial arts. And so I heard about it from martial arts people and watched it in that way. But I come to find out that lots of people, this was like a big part of their childhood. I was just curious, when did you first watch The Last Dragon? And what did you think about it then compared to now?
I feel like when I first saw it, it was probably mid-90s. I was in like East Brooklyn, New York. That's something I would see visiting my family out there. You know what I mean? And to me, it was, first of all, just an entertaining movie, but it was kind of a scary movie.
Really?
You know what I mean? Like for all the stuff, for all the hilarity and everything going on, like I was a young kid. I was like in my early teens, you know what I'm saying? If even teen at that point. But it was like, I remember watching it and being like, leading up to Shonuff was when you're a young kid, he's a bad man.
Yeah.
Scary dude. leading up to him kicking butt. It was all, it basically, it got all of the emotional rise out of me that it was meant to. That's all I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Like, now I'm not so easily emotionally controlled. Like, I can watch it and be like, interesting. Well, nah. Then I was like, he's drowning him. You're going to kill him. You know what I'm saying? Like, it hurt. Yeah. It hurt my heart.
Well, that's interesting to hear, because I think that's something that, having only watched it as an adult, that never really hit. You know, it was sort of always this safe, funny kind of thing. I knew nothing bad was going to happen to Bruce Leroy, but I can imagine watching it as a kid and being like, no!
And even after knowing what was going to happen, like, to watch it again, I'm like, it's going to be tough. I'm going to have to watch my boy get beat up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Sure. And like, dipping his head in the water, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Why would y'all let him win? It was a big deal then, but it wasn't as much of a comedy to me then. You know what I'm saying? It was just a movie.
Right.
If parts happened to be funny, that was cool, but it wasn't the same. It was just a good movie. I wasn't catching all the subtle things and reasons it was funny. I was a child. I hadn't experienced any of life to understand why the interaction between him and the agents was hilarious. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wasn't there yet. His Mr. Miyagi sending him on a ghost mission to understand that the master he's looking for is from within, not from without.
Yeah. It's funny, though, because I'll watch that now and be like, dang, that's like actually good advice. That's a good shifu right there. Is like that is not a sort of like
he did not wrong him for sending him on this quest.
No, I think it's kind of brilliant.
Cookie machine.
Yeah. No, it's hilarious.
Yeah. And he did it just as a regular guy. Like, no, all right, you know what? Go find the master. The juxtaposition of how seriously Bruce Leroy takes everything. Is what keeps the movie afloat until he like breaks character and stuff. But like that's brilliant. That part right there is just like, he's just.
And it starts right there. That's what I was about to say. I love that character of his first master, because Bruce Leroy is taking the Bruce Lee sort of embodiment and the idea of what he thinks about kung fu and martial arts from the movie so seriously. And his teacher is just a guy. Like, he's a guy that goes on vacation to visit his mom in Florida. And like, he's not the sort of mystical master from the movies that Bruce Leroy expects him to be. And frequently he tells him like, hey, calm down a little bit, man.
Then they also start by showing you that he is indeed a badass.
He is, though. Yeah, he's like, throwing arrows and stuff at him.
No, he like sneaks up on him and like shoots an arrow at him, and he like stops what he's doing and blocks it, and he's like, see, you're ready. We're like, you're ready. So it's like, it starts off like, okay, he does have superhuman abilities to a certain extent. So like, it takes away that suspension of disbelief in that way. Like, just flow with it. He's a badass.
Right. Bruce Leroy is, right?
Bruce Leroy. Yeah. Like, I'm like, once he blocks the arrow that his master snuck up on him, you're like, okay, that's a bad boy.
Right.
A good sidebar or something I would point out to my kids would be something like, hey, look, even though he knew he was capable, he definitely withstood, like, he took the temptation of fighting, and then he had to face the ridicule of people being like, oh, you're a wuss, you don't fight. And all the whole time, still knowing that he could kick all the ass. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know.
Right.
He was a very strong person for that. I'm glad that, you know, in this type of movie, the good guy won. It was like, in spectacular fashion.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Catching bullets in his teeth. They say he could catch a bullet in his teeth. They're like, you know what I mean? They set all of it up. They're like, yo. It was very cute. Very well done. Anyway.
And I think we'll linger here for a second, because I think like the very first scene where Shonuff challenges Bruce Leroy in the theater, he just gets to walk away. And so we're like, okay, that's pretty cool. He's walking away. The scene you're talking about where Bruce Leroy has to like kiss his shoes, right? Was he say, kiss my, what is it? It's kiss my Converse, right? That's his line, right? And he does. And that's when his little brother gets so upset, right? And
that was multiple times. Then when they trashed his, when they trashed the family's pizzeria.
And it's, no, but I think that's a really worthwhile point. Bruce Leroy is tested a number of times to see how he will react. Mm-hmm. And he exercises the hardest discipline, which is to not use his superpowers to beat the hell out of people.
Yeah, like constantly.
Like,
you know what I'm saying? I would tattoo an ass onto my foot. It's like my foot would be so far. Yeah. Everybody, what? Did you see me eating popcorn watching a movie? You know what I'm saying? Like, short work.
And there's that really emotional scene, too. I think it's right after the pizza place gets trashed, where Bruce Leroy is doing heavy bag work, right? And he's very emotional. Mm-hmm. And he's doing the right thing. He's taking out his anger on the heavy bag, reciting his oath, you know, mm-hmm. Which I have written down somewhere because I was like, dang, that's a pretty good mantra he's got. It's long, but it's good.
I didn't even stop to consider how powerful that was, that he was venting.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk. You know, as much as this is a martial arts movie, it's also a music movie. I mean, this is a Motown production, even. This is a Motown movie from 1985, and I was curious how the musicality of this film might have resonated with you differently than me. I wouldn't say I grew up on Motown. That wasn't like the kind of sort of music that was just around all the time. So I'm curious if the sort of vibe of the Motown music in the film, or the sort of depiction of music producers and would-be starlets and the early days of music videos, if that meant something different. What did that add or take away to the film for you?
For me, it was very unspectacular. I feel like every song chosen was like a caricature. It also reminded me like there was a beginning to our like male R&B artists that were like more androgynous or more feminine in presentation, and it's like stuff where I was like, oh, DeMar, like I've heard this song before. I never knew what that human looked like. But I was a younger person, like irrelevant in that way. Some of the cornier hip hop, the very typical beats that would pop. None of it was spectacular to me. I think the silly songs in the movie that were made for the movie stuck with me more.
It's funny to me that this was a Motown production, but also the villain was a music producer. This like talentless producer.
And I really think he was again, that he made his money in arcade, in something to do with arcade, in like video gaming. Mm-hmm. The tech nerds fantasize about their favorite artists, players, cool kids that they couldn't hang out with back in the day. Mm-hmm. And now they are tech nerds with money. Like, I can essentially buy you. Like, I can, like he did with his bodyguard. Right. That he apparently was like, yeah, I'll make you a prize fighter. And now you just bodyguard for Eddie Arcadian.
Just my hired muscle that I...
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's funny because I guess that character's supposed to be sort of like a Rocky that never got to be a champion. Mm. And you were talking about the songs that stuck to you the most were the ones that were made up, the silly songs for this movie. Mm-hmm. The same's true for me for Rocky. Like the songs that are very much on the nose of like, you're the best around. It's just like, yeah.
Turn it down. Like, yeah, let's go.
It's just something about it.
Yeah, the real songs that were like... Yeah. No, this song is actually terrible.
You are the last dragon. You know? Got the power and the glow. It's like, yeah, tell me about the movie. Tell me the whole plot of the movie.
Down, 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 down.
All right.
The glow.
So we talked about the music. We talked about the sort of how this movie hit different when you were a teen. We talked about sort of where you were at that point in your life. I'm curious, when you were a kid, were you a Bruce Lee fan? Were there other martial arts movies that sort of stuck out for you that you remember watching as a kid?
I feel like out in general, I was a martial arts fan. As much as like a kid enjoys the idea of kicking butt.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's about the extent of it. And that as I got older, again through Wu-Tang and more music and older, siblings and cousins and things like that, eventually I got to a point where I had a movie binge where I just had to catch up. I'm like, there's some parts of pop culture that I'm just ignorant to because I didn't pay attention. I was doing other stuff.
Sure.
So like I'm like, all right, let me just go back, and so I basically watched a ridiculous catalog of old kung fu flicks of all the flavors and like, you know what I mean, from the silliest to the most serious to the most cinematically beautiful. Like, you know what I mean? There's like there's so many flavors that like I'm like, nah, you can't just say kung fu flicks to me because there are flavors. But this particular flick definitely falls right in line with what I would say is the most common vibe, which is that wrapped in, no matter how serious the movie appears to be, they always have time to stop and be funny.
Yeah.
There's always time for a comedic sidebar. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Master of the flying guillotine. This dude is chopping heads. He is literally snatching heads off of bodies. They will find multiple places to have something be funny. And you're like, I don't even know how this fits into this movie of body snatching and head decapitation, but that was hilarious. You know what I'm saying? So this was this wasn't even spoof-like.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, in actuality, it wasn't even it wasn't even a spoof. It was just set in Harlem.
I felt when I first watched this, I was like, oh, I get it. This is going to be a joke movie. It's going to be making fun of kung fu movies, but the joke is, hey, it's a black guy. That's the and it's like, no, this is just like actually a good kung fu movie. It's like a sick martial arts movie.
About a guy that like is like a little too obsessed with Bruce Lee, but actually has skills.
Right.
And then this jerk that's just like, why do I keep hearing that this guy is better than me? And why won't he fight me? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so
it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, so my next question was going to be just about that. Like, initially, it seems like Bruce Leroy is going to just be a cheap joke. You know, this sort of like Carl Douglas. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Yeah, that kind of thing, right? And it's like, it's just going to be a joke about a black kid from Harlem imitating Orientalized depictions of martial arts.
Yeah.
But then the film creates layers of satire by showing various other characters imitating other cultural stereotypes or subverting their own. And so I really wanted to ask you, what did you make of all this racialized humor in the movie between you have Bruce Leroy imitating Bruce Lee, obviously, but then when he's searching for the master, he sees these Chinese guys in Chinatown that are all trying to be jive, right? And they're like looking up the rules in a book to playing dice and trying to break dance badly. You know what I mean? And then like it doubles down later where Bruce Leroy shows up to them to deliver food and has to pretend he's like wears the sort of black outfit. Like he dons all these like black cultural stereotypes.
He pretending to be blacker.
Right.
Again, to me, as a longtime black man,
yeah, when did you first start being black?
Been black my whole life, man.
Wow, man.
Setting records. Like lived in Africa black.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And yeah. Resided.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I don't know how to feel about any of the characters because none of them, again, I've seen all of these characters in real life. I have these Asian friends. I have the black friend that feels that he's not, or sometimes is considered not black enough. Has to black it up a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like, as silly as, like, the only character that wasn't a real character was Sho'nuff. The only character that was complete and utter nonsense was Sho'nuff. He's the only, like, it's like they just made that's the only character that, or let me just say, that's the only character I haven't encountered in real life. I guess that's, you know, that might be I don't know. I don't know what he is a metaphor for, but besides just being a jerk.
I mean, that was straight up going to be my next question is, who's the master?
No. No, not at all.
No, man. But
I'd have smacked him. But me personally, he had skills too, so I'm not.
He did have skills.
Yeah, we're not messing. But you know, I just feel like he represents life's challenges, showing you that, look, man, you can be minding your sweet business, just trying to find the master, just trying to just do right by your family and everybody else.
Right.
And trouble can sure enough come looking for you.
Sure enough.
And when you try to say no to trouble, it keep coming back like, no, I must trouble you.
Sure enough.
And then at some point, you have to realize, you know, and I'm going to figure out how to teach this to my boys, is that there is a time to fight. There definitely is a time to fight. Hey, there's a whole lot of time to avoid fighting and do all the others, but there is a time to fight. You know what I'm saying?
Sure enough.
If you can figure out before it's too late when it's time to fight, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. And I think that's a good read on it. I mean, on the one hand, I think it's important he's the shogun of Harlem because everything about him is supposed to read karate, Japanese martial arts, and that's indicative of all your classic kung fu films, all your classic Bruce Lee. You have the Chinese hero, and you have the Japanese villain. You have kung fu versus karate. But the other weird sort of like what you said, non-real thing about Sho'nuff is he's this blaxploitation character. He is a stereotype of a stereotype of a stereotype.
He's not even. Like the crazy part about him as a character, typically in the films that I've seen, like you got to do something to somebody. Somebody has to be wronged. Somebody needs to be avenged. If somebody is in the game of martial arts tournaments to see who's the best. Tournaments happen.
Right.
You find out who's the best and stuff.
Right.
This guy, just of his own accord, was like, I heard somebody say you was good. I'm going to kill you with my hands and feet.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, fight me, but like, I'm not gonna, adhere to the tap out rule. You know what I'm saying? Like, fight me to the death, essentially. Like, he has it, but that's what he's saying. He's like, nah, I'm going to beat you, if not to death. Right? That he needs to know that he's the best, that he's the master. Tell me again, he's just a big black ego for no reason. It just pops up out of nowhere, it's an ego monster, and has his little minions feeding him.
Right.
The lines.
That's why I think, like, I wrote, and I'm curious what you think about this. First of all, I took note that I'm pretty sure he's the only character in the film to use the N-word. And it's usually in response to something Bruce Leroy is saying or doing. And I think it's pretty intentional. I think that more than, he's not a believable character. So I think he almost seems to exist to remind Leroy that no matter how much he meditates, uses chopsticks, or affects his speech, that he can't change who he quote unquote really is.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
It's like, yo, you're still a neighbor.
Right.
Like,
and I mean, am I getting too deep by asking if Sho'nuff is supposed to represent the struggle against internalized racism? I mean, because you could read this movie as Sho'nuff's not a character so much as he's this inner demon that Leroy has to battle. I mean, what do you think about that?
He's he's more of an idea.
I mean, is that something that resonates with you? Like
I'm
this idea, like your own demons? Are you talking about having friends that, play the race game of like, am I black enough in this context? Do I need to tone it down in this? Thinking about what other people perceive you as.
No, in this particular case, like I want to give Sho'nuff some kind of deeper context, but just coming from what I'm seeing, feeling, like he is simply just a jerk that represents the adversity that we face. He represents things that would otherwise seek to take you out of character. His whole goal is to belittle Leroy and to make him act out of character.
Right.
He's like, yo, no, you are a nigger. You're a neighbor. You know what I'm saying? Like, right. and every other, if I poke them, they fight me. Matter of fact, all I had to do was stand in front of the movie theaters, like say, hey, anybody, come on. And the whole theater got up to fight them one by one. Everybody was like, oh, yeah, I'll take a swing at this. Like, what the heck is going on?
That's crazy.
And he's just like, nope.
Yeah.
I will not be moved until, I don't even remember, what was the final straw, I guess, when they had the woman.
Yeah. He had to protect someone else, right?
Tied up in a basement.
And his little brother, too. They were both in danger, basically. And,
yeah. All right, you got him hostage?
Yeah.
Well, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know, man.
I wish you would kick butt just before that. Before the kidnapping. Just go ahead and dismiss. But after the kidnapping, you know, now it's a fight to the death and guns are involved. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know he's supposed to be some kind of character foil because we hear Leroy earlier in the film telling his love interest about the glow and how a master could embody the glow just in their hands and it would wield awesome destructive power. But then he says a true master could wield it throughout his entire body to, quote, create something beautiful. And I'm really curious what you think he means by that. What is that something beautiful? What could that be? What's the difference ultimately between someone like Sho'nuff wielding it in his hands, you know, and then Bruce Leroy channeling the glow throughout his whole body? What does he mean by that?
Well, the only thing I can pull from that is when your energy is sourced in negativity, it's limited. And when your energy is sourced in the light and in goodness, it is unlimited. It is all-encompassing. All right. So, you know, just metaphorically, Sho'nuff has this anger, this angry, dark strength where he's like, light. It's like light flashes of lightning, like pinches and pierces. Every strike is rah, growl, draw, strike. You know what I'm saying? It's just grah. When Leroy gets the glow, he's all but drowned. He relaxes. You pull him up, he smiles, and he knows. He knows. He's sourced in the all-knowing, and he's like, I know that the master is me. I am the master. You walk around trying to ask him, am I the master? Who's the master? Tell everybody, please tell me I'm the master. Sho'nuff, right? I'm the master. Shut your ass. You're the goddamn master. You wouldn't have to ask nobody. But yeah, so young man, he wakes up to realizing like, yo, no, I'm looking for me. What am I asking questions about? I am he. Right. He is I, and I am him. You know what I'm saying? and then proceeds to all but gently kick this dude's butt. And then just like the darkness will do, they'll tell you, let's do a fist fight, and then they'll shoot you.
Yep. Yeah, because, I mean, well, so, because ultimately the villain here was Eddie Arcadian. He hired Sho'nuff and all these other villains to try and hunt down Bruce Leroy, right? He's the one that pulls the gun, right?
Yeah, the next layer above, like,
You know?
That's like, oh, yeah, that guy was just a maniac wanting to, you know, prove himself, like, and then this guy's pulling the strings, got y'all fighting, because he has a completely other motivation, which really just started with his small penis desire to have his pseudo girlfriend's video played at somebody's show, and they said no. Right. So what in the ditty is that? Like, oh, you said no? Well, now this whole shit has to go on. Because,
I mean,
you can't accept that this young lady does not want to play your actually very bad music video that doesn't even look like it belongs in that style of club on her show.
Right. All of the struggle throughout this whole movie has just been because a white guy got told no.
And so he chose to insert himself forcefully into everybody's lives, creating chaos, paying people to inflict harm. Like, he literally recruited mass killers.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's insanity. Yeah. Yes, it's insanity. I wonder where they got that idea from. It's like watching it as an adult it's so disturbing in a sense. Like when you start going almost conspiracy theory level of like stepping back at the big picture, being like, somebody told Eddie no, and this causes, you know what I'm saying? Like, this was very unnecessary. Like, yeah, we sit back and we're entertained by the little hilarity, the things that go on in the natural flow of what their lives were. Pause for a moment and like see little man break dance out of his like restraints. I'm like, that's freaking that's comedy gold. He just popped and locked out of the chains. I'm like, hilarious. But
we were talking a little bit earlier about the female characters, right? Racial stereotypes aren't the only thing that get twisted in this movie. Stereotypes about gender are here as well. Is there anything else, any other characters that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, one thing that was odd, it was odd to me, but odd for, like, I guess an interesting reason, is like there was definitely a presence of gay characters, what looked like there were even like transgender characters and stuff like that. So I don't understand how this goes from like popular, like, I'm like, yeah, this, when did it become a problem? I don't understand. Like, it's always been there. When did this become a thing where people were fighting about? Like, you know what I'm
interesting,
saying?
right? Like,
I'm like, even back then, and it was very fine. There was I never heard anybody talk about the movie and be like, you know what?
Yeah.
I know this. I'm like, yeah, we know people. We have family members like this. So I know people like, well, it was not a thing. So it kind of hurt my heart because I feel like somewhere along the line, just unrelated to the movie, people's struggles was propagandized and like made into a thing that wasn't a thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like somebody made a beef for us to beef about, and I'm like, damn it, it was already okay. Like, everybody was already like aware that humans were extremely different across the board. Like, many spectrums.
I think this is an amazing movie to show that opening theater scene where everybody's fighting is a really classic example of that. It's like, you see,
the eclectic, oh my God, the array of people. That's how I grew up in the city. I'm just like, none of it looked in any way weird to me.
Right.
Like, the only thing that stood out to me now is like the reactions of now. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This would be reacted upon differently now. That joke wouldn't even be a joke. They wouldn't even let that be a joke. That would be we'd have to huff and puff about that one. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh, interesting.
It is interesting. I mean, and that just brings me kind of to one of my wrap-up questions, which is, how do you think this movie holds up 40 years later? I mean, because like it's so amazing to me to watch a film from 1985 and, like you say, see this diverse cast of characters and these sort of like background people, like it's not a bit, it's not a joke, it's not like token representation of any kind. It's just like, that's who you'd see in the Grindhouse. Like,
was
this who it was.
All of this racism and stuff. I feel, again, like, forget just the gender part of it, like just the racism in general. It's like, these things were not as huge of a problem as I feel like they've been made into. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I just think back and I'm just like, wait a minute. If I were to like be like, okay, what's the percentage of instances that have occurred in my life that I would say were racially, you know what I'm saying? It would be a much smaller percentage. Like, it'd be like, I can comfortably say 15% of the bullshit. Like, I compare, some stuff was questionable. I'm gonna leave the questionable stuff out, but I can say with complete confidence, I could point out examples. That guy didn't like me because of my skin. That situation right there, she literally said, I will call the cops on you and they won't believe you because you're a neighbor. Dang. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, these type of situations where it's like, I walked in for a job, Ed McClain on the phone, and then when I showed up, the look on this person's face was like they did not expect a POC. You know what I'm saying? I was like, crap, you could have hid that a little bit, man. You could have tried. You didn't even try. I tried to talk through it and your jaw is still open. Sir, can you pick your jaw up? Am I going to get the job or not? That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just saying, like, it has definitely been made into much more of a problem and issue than I think it really is. Right. You know what I'm saying? I'm just saying, we've been living in harmony for a long time. Like,
yeah, I mean,
I used to live in Texas. Like, okay, these young boys mooned us and threw rocks at us one time for being black, but they were elementary kids. Like, somebody was teaching them wrong. Whatever. They exist. They're out there. You know what I mean? There's places where they would just rather not interminglate, and that's whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's a tough question. I mean, on the one hand, I think you're pointing out something important, which is this movie is set in New York City. And so it's like, okay, maybe that was true. What you're saying is truer in this context. But then, as you've said, Southwest Virginia, Texas, these are different places.
Boston, Massachusetts. Again, pockets of things. There's been, I remember I went to Cambridge Wrench and Latin High School, and they loved to tell us a story about how the Klan came to the high school and tried to recruit one time, and the security and everybody present just pretty much allowed them to get beat up. Like the trouble, the level of trouble that they started, they just were like standing by. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, nobody gets like, really hurt, but like, no, y'all, they faced the reckoning that they went there for, and they learned that was not a space that the kids or students or anybody there wanted to partake in that kind of ideology. And it's like, and back then I'm like, yeah, right on. But now I'm like, so they came as like, they didn't make an appointment. Like they just was like, we just gonna pull up to the high school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, off of Mass Ave, and see if anybody wants to join our club. I don't know. There's something there that needs to be investigated.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
You didn't make an appointment. Who
like
invited you? I just feel like
exactly.
I came to speak with the Rotary Club. Like, you like, which club did you come to speak for? Like, now you just came to the quad. You're just gonna sit on the grass and throw up your gang signs? Like, maybe drop a couple of N-bombs as people walk by. Like, what did they do to alert us that did they come dressed? Anyway, I don't know.
I mean, to your point about like, let's just use that number 15%. You can point to 15% of the times in your life that something has been racially motivated. Blatant racism.
Like,
but so for me, right, I can think of exactly one time in my life that my whiteness has been the problem.
You missed so many more times. You didn't know.
What?
One time, me being white was the problem.
Well, okay, let me take that back. One time I was discriminated against.
Was discriminating against you, like blatantly.
The number I can't tell you is how many times my privilege as a white person has helped me. And so if you add that to your 15%.
So many, I can't even count.
Well, I mean, it's true, man. That's the thing. Is like, I never know if I'm getting that job because of how I sound on the phone and what I say, or what I look like when I get there. I mean, I'm smart and I'm nice with it, but you know what I'm saying?
So am I.
Well, exactly.
That's why on all online applications, the voluntary survey, I identify as white. A famous example for me is I literally was not getting any callbacks for a job. I went back into this university system, changed my ethnicity to white, got a call back the next afternoon, and it was just like, oh man, like
that's wild.
Like, why? How did we miss this?
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying? And like, and then casually told me like, hey, you filled out the application incorrectly. Like, yes, you submitted your resume, but we do a blanket word search and it only reads the words that are in the bubble field when you fill out the electronic part. So next time you fill out application for us, you got to fill out that part, even though you do upload your resume. Like, that's how we search candidates, blah, blah, blah. But we saw that you were SurfSafe certified after you changed your ethnicity to being white. After we found out you were white.
Jeez.
And then I was in there like swimwear. And then I had a salaried position, like in a moment. All I had to do was like get to the interview. But I personally had noticed that jobs that I was qualified for, I was not getting called for. And I was like, I'm overqualified. I'm like reaching down because I just need a job. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I was like, oh. Yeah. Like, I'm insulted. You want to hire me for this? It's like a hospital kitchen. What is your problem? Like, what?
Yeah. Now, I teach my students all the time. I show them this video about this guy named Juan that changed his name to John on his resume and suddenly was getting all these callbacks. Same kind of thing. Like, yeah, man, it's a real thing in the world. I brought that
John Germandez. I like it.
I just brought that up because I think some people would hear you saying, 15% blatant racism, and I just wanted to qualify that by saying, like, but then if you add the number of times that I've been helped out for no reason other than I'm pasty as a mofo, that makes that 15% a lot more severe, because every time I'm being helped out is limiting those chances for those black nurses and those black chefs and those black, I mean, everything.
Oh, man,
I'm just saying.
It's sad, but I don't know. It's bad sometimes because, people do naturally want to protect their own kind or thing or their business or whatever. So But, sometimes it comes off as really ugly. Like, I've literally been in situations where I'm looking at people that are my friends, but also my subordinates that could rise through the ranks being, like, pulled aside and being like, you gonna let this neighbor be your boss? Like, come on, man, step it up. And that's like, you know what? There's a lot of ways we can motivate this young man to do better at work. But, like, that he should be ashamed that I'm his boss is not the way.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And for me to hear that and then see my boy, like, not even be like, wow, you want to know what he said to me? Like, I was like, okay. There's definitely clubs, and you got to know when you're not invited.
Yeah.
And the quicker, when I learned when to walk away from these such clubs, it's like, you can blow smoke for as long, but, like, there's times where I've had to just be like, ghosting this particular job is appropriate, and they're going to show me that it was appropriate, because nobody's going to reach out to me and be like, hey, you okay? Like, what happened? Where'd you go? What? Nothing.
Yeah. Well, to them, it's mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
That sucks, man.
Like, I've done that, and then I've even done that and, like, played around with it, like, come back the next day. What? And they're like, oh, what is going on? Am I fired? Am I messing up y'all's pool for when I would quit? Like,
I'm curious, because this movie definitely invokes race, makes some jokes about race, but ultimately I think it serves a larger point. I'm just curious, like, what kinds of lessons do you think this movie is trying to teach? And particularly you being super dad, I mean, one, do you think this is a movie you would show your kids, if not now, maybe later? And if you do show it to them, what are the kinds of things that you hope they take away from a movie like this?
Well, I definitely would show it to my kids later, especially because we do martial arts with you and things like that. Like, they would be interested.
Yeah.
The core concept of, like, you being the master and the glow being for men, like, the glow, the concept of the glow, big on that, sharing that with them.
Sure.
The self-restraint that he showed throughout the whole movie, big on that.
Yeah.
Shonuff being an absolute jerk. Like, dropping N-bombs, like, just being ruthless about everything, and then getting his butt absolutely waxed. You're like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I would like to show them a movie where the good guy wins. You're like, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Like, check that out. That happens too. Guys, I want y'all I think somewhere. Remember when good guys used to win? Like, there's a lot of good takeaways from it, but, like, for me, it is not racial. It is for me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that movie was made for me.
Right.
So I don't see anything racial about even, like, our love of martial arts and Japanese. Like, I feel like, being an adult, knowing that, like, the Japanese don't really like the blacks, but I feel like other Asian cultures, like, do not have as much of a problem. And, like, there's definitely a harmonious, like, when I really experience other cultures, even my friends that are, Hispanic, like, I realize there's always, like, a love. There's a kind of a love, understanding there, like that. Like, everybody, we feel like, you got some flavor that I don't got. You know what I'm saying? And I like your little flavor. And they like all my flavor. You know what I'm saying? Like, what y'all eat? That's crazy. Like, let me have some of that.
Yeah.
So there's, like, you know what I mean? There's always this give and take love there. So it's not even racial. It's just hilarious. Like, the three Asians, like, so my Asian friend loves that part. He will act it out in a heartbeat. Like, he loves it. He's like, bro, that's just hilarious to him.
I was just thinking about that part. It was like, well, you want to play like we play in Harlem, don't you?
Yeah.
Playing hopscotch.
Yeah. The wife lost it. I was like, yeah, now she's locked in.
Yeah.
But we enjoyed it. Yeah, like, I'll be really honest with you, and I'm racially sensitive, I would say. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, you almost didn't want to be my friend.
Yeah,
put me through the ringer for 6 months. Had a whole trial, auditions. Not
even sure. I just can't. You can't trust the wahites. Man. You gotta keep them. It's like. It doesn't matter if I want you to be my friend. It matters if you want to be my friend. Yeah. It matters if you want to be a friend. You know what I'm saying? It matters what kind of friend you want to be.
Right.
And so, again, I've learned to just be like, hey, man, you just got to step back and let the person be the person, and don't be like, oh, I want want this. I want him to be like this. And just like, hey, man, I hope you just be a cool dude. That's all, you know? And so, you know, and then I just hold my breath like, please don't drop any N-bombs. I'm like, what do you think? Please don't say anything weird. Oh, God. You know what I'm saying? It's like, come on.
Right.
Because there are things that you can't rebound from. And it's like, please. And I'm sure there's some messed up something I could say. And you'd be like, Ed, no. We don't want to kill them. Yeah. That's awful.
And that's exactly why we had you on the podcast. I was like, you're going to slip up. We're going to get him. We're going to get him on record.
I'll say whatever I want. Wish somebody would. I'm the Shogun. Like, I swear to God. I stand by my nonsense. You know, for whatever reason, I think it'll believe it. Like,
well, let me give you the soapbox then. Is there any final fatherly wisdom you want to lay down for our audience? Any either big takeaways from this movie, big things that you think of that connect to your own life, or sort of big takeaways that you as a person, you know, during our compassionate conversation about masculinity and media that you think listeners need to know? I mean, you already hit me with a gem of like, don't try to force people to be something you want them to be. Let them be who they are. I think that was good advice.
Just observe.
Yeah.
Observe, but also be you, and then hold true to your appointments and timings and the things that you say. That's all you could do. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, unfortunately for you, you have to be like, man, Ed, like, you be showing up to appointments and stuff. You say you gonna watch a movie and let me interview you, and then here we are. I'm like, why is this not just par for the course?
You know why? There's too many people that are full of it.
Because I'm like, I did my job. Yeah. Yes, I did. In terms of fatherly gems of wisdom or takeaways from this, my biggest thing with this particular movie is that, you know, the good guy won, but like you said, the example of even after being shot at, like Bruce not killing Eddie or Shonuff, or, you know what I mean, just being able to show mercy. It was the exact kind of masculinity that we need. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yo, he was being taunted and messed with the whole time, and he was able to show masculine self-restraint, and then we still got our justice when he was able to show, okay, this is now masculine butt-kicking time. This dude's literally trying to murder. Now, if I could teach my kids, maybe not wait until he's almost drowned you. You know what I mean? To glow up.
Right. Yeah.
But if you gotta wait to the last second to justify kicking his butt, sure. But the type of masculinity that Bruce represented was very awesome. He dressed his own way. He acted his own style. Everybody's like, yeah, you're this, and that. You're corny. But then by the end, it's like, yo, he's so corny. Yo, leave him. That's my brother. He ain't, you know what I'm saying? Like, he is corny, but man, that dude is... he is the man. Like, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, yeah, that's the kind of respect you want for just being you all the way.
Love it.
You know what I'm saying? Like, he was him all the way. Even being adorable enough to like talk to the girl and be like, hey, look, I just, you know what I'm saying? I kind of like this girl. And I mean, my friend is trying to figure out if this girl could show him some moves. I don't know. Like, and there was two kids, and I'm like, y'all talking about dance moves or sex? I keep bouncing this back. It's kind of, I like what's going on here. But y'all, you know what I'm saying? It was very cute. Like, you know what I'm saying? And that's the same dude that could kick Shonuff, you know what I'm saying? Like, all the masculinities. Like, hey, man. I mean, I've been so used to kicking butts, I don't even really know how to be gentle around a woman. Like, which is also an important thing that young men, I think, need to learn. Yeah.
And I think he's definitely a good role model for that. You know, like gentle, open, true to himself, restraint, but power, you know, not talking about it, being about it.
Yeah.
Love it, man.
I like to keep me a little 15% Shonuff, though.
Just my hands.
Just so y'all know what's
me
up.
And my feet. I keep mine on my feet.
I'm just saying. Sometimes people ain't trying to hear Bruce Leroy. You gotta show up and Shonuff. Like, oh, really? Well, after I'm done with this, I will go back to my alter Negro, but right now.
Well, speaking of that, let's wrap this up. Ed, it's been a real pleasure talking with you today about a wonderful movie. I really appreciate your time. And why don't you tell people where they can find all the different sides of you?
No.
No?
You can't. Look up BLAGHDAD. It's a unique word. Nothing else should pop up. If you find me, good. Otherwise, I'm not concerned about it. I'm not worried about it.
Fair enough.
I'm not that person.
Well, I'll let them know you're on SoundCloud. You're on Bandcamp.
Whatever. I'm at home with my family.
And there you have it, fresh from the source. Ed McClain, a.k.a. Black Dad. That's BLAGHDAD on Bandcamp. Can't tell you how much I really super enjoy his music and his production talents. I mean, I really do hope y'all go check out his stuff. It's like, it's got heart, much like this movie. It's got something to say, much like this movie. And it's pretty dang funny, too.
It's fun.
So,
he's having a good time.
Yeah. So thanks, Ed, for being on the show. Let's wrap it up, shall we? Let's slap a rating on this bad boy. How do you want to score this thing?
Well, it's gotta be pretty high. I mean, once again, you kind of have to go in with a little bit of a genre awareness, knowing that it's doing some satirical things.
Mm-hmm.
And
some cultural awareness, I think,
and
right?
some cultural awareness. Yeah, that's part of the satire. Those two things kind of go hand in hand.
Just like we talked about with South Park. Like, if you're a dummy, don't watch it.
Well, sure. But I think the barrier to entry with this one is lower than South Park, even in terms of like what you need to have a cultural understanding of. I think like you can also just kind of watch it and have a pretty nice time.
Unless you're my parents, apparently.
Well, they didn't like Show Enough.
I am shocked my dad did not like this movie. I'm like actually taken aback, but it's okay. It's not his podcast.
That's all right. He can go watch.
Beep. Don't make more work for me. I'm cutting that out. I'm gonna leave it in, but I'm gonna like leave a beep over whatever you just said.
Go for it.
Filter you.
Illicit knowledge. I'm being censored already.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say like, oh god, I think I'm in a 9 territory. I think it's really charming. I think the female characters are very good. I think the main character is, I just feel like I haven't seen a lot of characters like him who are so like genuinely sweet, but have such a lesson to learn about like getting outside of your own experience and like when it's appropriate to, use you. God help me if I ever have to use my art.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's sweet.
Wow, I'm shocked by that too. That might be the highest rating you've given something on this podcast. Have you given anything a 9 before?
Sure, yeah. I've
Really?
given out a couple of 10s.
What?
I've given out at least one 10.
What was a 10?
I think It's a Wonderful Life got a 10 from me.
Oh, geez. Okay, well, I'm gonna give this a 9.5.
Put George Bailey in this movie.
I don't think I've given anything a 10.
You also gave It's a Wonderful Life a 10. Although in both of our defenses, my grandfather had just died when we recorded that episode, so we were feeling some kind of way. But anyway.
It's hard. Okay, well, that's a good example of a movie that really pulls on your heartstrings and, like, it's easy to give a sort of, like, sympathetic inflation of a score there. I'm wondering if I really do believe that It's a Wonderful Life is a 10 out of 10. But I guess the whole point of what we're rating is like, how safe of a place for boys is this? Like, how good of a movie is this to have a compassionate conversation about masculinity in media? So for that, okay, it's probably a 10. Last Dragon, I'm going to give it a 9.5. I don't know why it's not a 10, other than I'm just shocked that I gave a 10 to something else. I don't know. Like, that's the only... Is it a 10? Probably not. It's a little too silly.
These ratings don't, like, matter functionally. So.
Oh, they matter to me.
Okay.
I want to know what my composite average is, dear listener.
Oh,
and
man. Somebody make a spreadsheet.
But no, I'll give it a 9.5, and the bump up is really because, like, I've seen a lot of martial arts movies. I've seen a lot of versions of this kind of a trope, and for as silly as this movie is, it does an excellent job at communicating some important philosophy in nuanced ways that, like you said, I just haven't really seen in a lot of places. And for a movie that I thought was just going to be a big old joke, it's really great. It's really heartfelt, and I think has a lot to teach boys in general. And everyone, girls, and them, and snails too, maybe. I don't know. Probably not snails.
I bet there
maybe
were
sharks
snails in
though.
that pool.
Yeah.
We never got to see what the monster in the tank was.
That's why it's a 9.5.
That's why it's not a 10.
It's not a 10.
I at least wanted to see it.
Yeah.
I wanted to know what it was.
Well, it's scarier that way, you know? So yeah, well, what a wonderful show. Thanks so much, Kelcee, for letting me sort of steer the boat on this one. You know, I love a martial arts talk.
Yeah. Anytime you want to write all the notes,
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
I do have fun. I have fun writing the summaries because I get to like say very silly Letterkenny turn of phrases like the VJ, JJ, pumped up the DJ and the stage A, Ray J.
Yeah.
A-Bay, E-Bye, Biggie Bye.
Yes, listeners, that is the high quality wordplay you have come to expect from us here at A Safe Place for Boys. So come back next time for more of whatever that was.
It was better when I read it from the thing. My script.
Come back next time for more compassionate conversations about masculinity in media.
Bye.
Goodbye.